My mother told 150 people about my suicide attempt at my party. Months later, I turned the tables and watched her breakdown in front of her friends. My mother shared my worst secret to make everyone laugh. I showed hers so that everyone would leave. My mother, Catherine, always felt she was the funniest person in the room. She had been performing stand-up comedy at open mics for years, never getting above 5-minute stints at dive bars, but she considered herself a professional comic. Her whole demeanor revolved around making others laugh, even if it meant humiliating anyone for a joke. Growing up, every humiliating thing I did became part of her act. She informed my birthday party that I wet the bed at 8 p.m. and thought it was amusing. When I had my first period and bled through my trousers at school, she made it her closing line for months. But the worst thing she's ever done was during my engagement party. I'd been with my fiancé Ethan for 3 years before we decided to marry. Ethan's engagement party was held at his parents' country club, attended by his whole family, his father's business associates, and everyone significant in his life. Catherine arrived already inebriated, wearing a sequined gown as if she were winning an award. She constantly interrupting discussions to make jokes that didn't land. People smiled nicely but were clearly uneasy. Catherine clinked her glass halfway through dinner, preparing to deliver a speech that no one had requested. She began talking about how delighted she was that I had met someone who was willing to marry me despite everything. Then she told a humorous anecdote about how she never imagined this day would happen. She informed everyone about my mental breakdown at the age of 19. Not only did she mention it, but she also performed it as a comedy performance. She imitated my sobbing, acted out my pleading her for assistance, and performed an impression of me, claiming I wanted to die. She informed them about catching me with medications, getting me to the hospital, and the 48-hour hold. She created sound effects for the heart monitor. She really got on the floor to demonstrate how I had collapsed. They weren't laughing. Ethan's mother had tears in her eyes. His father seemed ill. My future brother-in-law went out but Catherine continued, adding, "The funniest part was when I told the psychiatrist I felt worthless and he said, 'Well, at least you're self-aware.'" She smiled at her own joke as 150 others sat in frightened silence. Ethan was unaware of any of this. I had planned to tell him someday, but not like this. Not as a means of entertaining his entire family. His granny clutched her pearls. His business partners exchanged stares. Catherine eventually realized no one was laughing and added, "Tough crowd," before sitting down like she'd killed it. Ethan's family departed immediately. Half of them have not communicated with me since. Following Catherine's visit, they believe I am unstable or that it runs in the family. Ethan nearly called off the engagement. It took months of couples therapy for him to believe I was fine, that it was just a one-time crisis years ago. Catherine never apologized, claiming I was overly sensitive and that humor stems from reality. She repeated the engagement party anecdote in her following performance, discussing how wealthy people lack a sense of humor. She said I should be glad that she made me memorable. The wedding was in 2 months. Catherine anticipated she would be delivering a speech and was already preparing content. She continued asking for humiliating tales about Ethan to keep things fair. She purchased a white sequined garment that resembled a bridal gown, claiming she needed to stand out in images. I told her she wasn't going to give a speech. She giggled and remarked, "I couldn't stop the bride's mother from talking." That's when I realized Catherine needed to know what it felt like. The week before the wedding, I invited all of her comedy buddies to what she mistook for my bachelorette party. She was happy that I had included her scene. She brought in 12 people from her open mic evenings, all of whom wanted to be comedians but felt they were funnier than they actually were. I stated I wanted to do a roast, but with a twist. We'd roast our parents for all the insane things they did while raising us. Catherine enjoyed it and commented, "Finally, I was developing a sense of humor." She spoke first, recounting additional anecdotes about my childhood that made me appear miserable. Others recounted really humorous stories about their parents. Then it was my time. I began by explaining how my mother became pregnant with me at the age of 17 by her married English instructor, Mr. Parker. She blackmailed him for money until his wife discovered it, at which point he committed suicide. How Catherine retained a suicide note that named her by name. The comic stopped laughing. I went on to explain how Catherine put vodka in my bottle to make me sleep at her parties. How she brought guys home to comment on my development. How she advised me to be friendlier to them because they had paid our rent. How she took my college fund from my grandmother's bequest and used it to pay for unsuccessful comedy lessons. I informed them about how she was dismissed from 10 jobs for stealing. She went to rehab 4 times but left because they wouldn't let her perform in group therapy. About her coming up intoxicated at my high school and the administration contacting child services. She told the social worker that I was lying for attention. The room was really silent. Catherine attempted to laugh it off, but I continued. I told them about the time she arrived at my 7th grade talent performance so drunk that she fell out of her chair, and how the other parents had to take her to the parking lot while I pretended I didn't recognize her. I reported finding her passed out in our bathtub with a lighted cigarette burning a hole in the shower curtain. When I discussed Christmas, Mother sold my Nintendo for drug money and informed me Santa was no longer real because we were too poor. Sam stood up first without looking at any of us, and proceeded to the door without saying a word. Olivia gazed at Catherine, her mouth slightly open. People are unable to stop watching vehicle accidents. Mia kept her phone up the entire time, filming everything, and I could see the red light that indicated it was still active. The vindication felt like electricity in my chest, hot, brilliant, and strong. However, something icy was creeping throughout my gut. I just completely ruined my mother in front of everyone she knew. Everyone who comprised her whole social life, and the expression on her face made me feel like I had kicked a dog. She attempted to chuckle, the false comic laugh she used when jokes failed, but her voice broke halfway through and came out like a cough. Her face had become white behind her makeup, and I could see a vein pulsating in her neck. Catherine opened her mouth and said, "Liar," but it sounded weak and pathetic rather than furious. She said I was making things up for attention and that I usually exaggerated everything, but her hands shook so violently that she had to set down her drink. The other comedians were staring at each other, having quiet discussions with their eyes, and I knew they were recalling all of Catherine's stories about me. David cleared his throat and recommended we all take a pause to get some air. His voice was too loud for the calm chamber. People began to move toward the entrance in an uneasy manner. There is no conversation, only the scrape of chairs and feet on the floor. Within 2 minutes the room had emptied, leaving only me and Catherine seated opposite from each other at a table strewn in empty drinks and wadded-up napkins. She stared at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before, one of genuine fear rather than her customary assurance. She wondered why I would do this to her voice tiny and aged. I told her she brought this on herself when she used my suicide attempt as a comedy routine at my engagement party in front of 150 people. The words sounded flat and harsh, and I saw her face collapse like paper. She began weeping, but not in the theatrical manner she typically does when she wants something. Her makeup was pouring down her cheeks in black streaks, making her seem different and worse. She said I had wrecked her reputation in the comedy scene, that these were her only friends, and that I had removed the one thing that made her feel important. I rose up while she was still speaking and took my jacket from the back of the chair. She continued shouting my name and asked me to stay so she could explain, but I went out and left her alone. The corridor outside the private room felt both bright and silent, and I could hear her weeping through the door. I didn't feel as happy about what I'd done as I expected. I simply felt exhausted, nasty, and as if I had eaten something harsh. Ethan phoned me 3 times that night, but I let it go to voicemail since I couldn't explain what I'd done. I sat on my couch, gazing at my phone as it lit up with his name, feeling my gut tighten each time. When I finally listened to the messages the next morning, his voice sounded frightened and bewildered, wondering if I was all right and informing me that Catherine had phoned him, weeping about me hitting her in public. The third message stated that his mother was asking him questions and he didn't know what to say. I felt wrath return to my chest since of course Catherine had already contacted him. Of course she was twisting things to make herself the victim, as she usually does with everything. She'd undoubtedly told him I was nasty and unstable, that I humiliated her for no reason, and that she was only trying to be a decent mother. I flung my phone across the room and it struck the wall hard enough to leave a scratch on the paint. I met Ethan for coffee the next afternoon at a cafe near his workplace, arriving early and ordering something I didn't drink. He entered looking exhausted, with black bags under his eyes as if he hadn't slept well. We went down at a corner table and I told him everything that transpired at the fictitious bachelorette party before Catherine could twist it any further. I recounted inviting her comic buddies, preparing the roast, waiting for my time, and then listing every nasty thing she had ever done. Ethan listened without interrupting, his coffee cooling in front of him, his expression becoming more serious with each detail. When I finished, he remained quiet for a long time, staring at me with an expression I couldn't interpret. Then he asked whether I felt better now that I'd heard her response, and the question hit me like a slap. I opened my lips to say yes, but nothing came out since I honestly didn't feel any better. I felt sick, angry, and terrified that I was growing into her, that I was becoming someone who hurts others while calling it justice. Ethan stated that his parents had asked if we might postpone the wedding because they were concerned about potential family tension during the ceremony. Panic swelled in my chest so quickly that my hands shook. I'd spent months organizing this wedding, selecting out flowers, testing different cakes, and fussing with the venue about table placements. I didn't want Catherine to spoil it either. To waste away another valuable day by focusing solely on her dysfunction. He informed me that his mother had expressly stated that she could not face another public spectacle such as the engagement party, and that she was still receiving queries from relatives about what they had observed. His father suggested that we wait till things calmed down and my family situation became more stable. The term stable made me want to scream because my family has never been stable, will never be stable, and if we waited for that, we would never get married. Catherine arrived at my apartment 2 days later without having called beforehand. And after looking through the peephole, I almost didn't open the door. She appeared really shattered in a way I had never seen before. Her hair was dirty and pushed back, and she wore sweatpants and an outdated t-shirt instead of her normal eye-catching clothes. I opened the door, and she went in without asking, sitting on my couch as if her legs couldn't support her longer. She informed me that 2 comedy clubs had barred her from their open mics when word spread about what I had uncovered. The Laugh Factory informed her that they were taking a different way, while the Comedy Store informed her that they were booked for the next 6 months. I had a flash of shame before remembering her on the floor at my engagement party, playing out my fainting and creating sound effects from the heart monitor as Ethan's grandma grabbed her pearls and his business friends exchanged frightened stares. She claimed that the allegation about Mr. Parker was real, that when she was 17 she became pregnant with her married English teacher and blackmailed him for money until his wife discovered it and he committed suicide. She claimed she had carried remorse over his death for 27 years and still had dreams about his wife calling her a murderer during the burial. She was 17 and dumb, and she had no idea how blackmail might drive someone to commit suicide. She informed me that his suicide note addressed her by name, stated she had wrecked his life and marriage, and that she had kept it concealed in a box beneath her bed for years. I sat there stunned since Catherine never acknowledged anything, never accepted responsibility, and never demonstrated genuine sorrow that wasn't simply manipulation to obtain what she wanted. I wasn't sure if this was genuine honesty or simply another performance, another attempt to make herself the victim of her own actions. Ethan's parents asked us both to supper at their home to clear the air before the wedding, and I knew it was some sort of test. Catherine vowed she'd behave and apologize properly, that she recognized how important this was, but I didn't believe she could go through one dinner without making everything about herself. Luke informed me that this meal was very important to his family, and that his mother was unsure if she could accept our marriage after all had transpired. I decided to attend since I had no option, but the entire journey over made me feel like I was about to vomit. Catherine met me there, coming in her beat-up automobile and dressed in a basic black outfit that appeared to be for a funeral. We went up to the home without speaking, and I could feel her shivering beside me. The dinner began awkwardly and only grew worse from there, with Ethan's mother being coldly nice in the way that affluent people are when they despise you yet show etiquette. His father hardly talked, instead passing plates and cutting his meal with precise, aggressive gestures. Catherine rushed into an apology that began well but quickly devolved into excuses about her terrible past, struggling as a single mother, and never having any assistance. Ethan's mother allowed her to speak for about 2 minutes before cutting her off in mid-sentence, stating that many people have difficult lives without abusing their children's pain for attention and pleasure. The words lingered in the air like smoke, as Catherine's face became crimson, then white. Ethan's father laid down his fork and inquired whether Catherine intended to exploit his son's wedding as fodder, and whether she had already begun working on jokes about his family. The inquiry was so clear and nasty that I felt defensive of Catherine for a moment before realizing he was correct to ask. Catherine's lips opened and closed, but nothing came out at first, and I saw her chest rise and fall in fast, shallow movements as if she couldn't get enough oxygen. She gripped the edge of the table with both hands, her knuckles becoming white, and when she finally spoke, her voice was little and broken in a manner I'd never heard before. She said yes. She had been a terrible mother, and she knew it even as she was doing it. But she couldn't stop herself since the only time she felt important was when she made others laugh. Ethan's father sat back in his chair and inquired whether she meant to use his son's wedding as fodder, or if she was already making jokes about this dinner in her brain. The query rested in the center of the table, like a knife. And everyone glanced at Catherine, waiting for her response. She shook her head as tears streamed down her cheeks. She shed genuine tears rather than the histrionic wailing she was accustomed to. She vowed she wouldn't deliver a speech at the wedding or make any jokes about our family since she knew she had already done enough damage. Ethan's mother set down her wine glass with a harsh click, saying it wasn't enough. Catherine needed to realize that she was on thin ice with their entire family, and one more incident would mean she'd never be welcome back. I felt a strange twist in my chest, like if I wanted to protect Catherine, even though she deserved everything they said to her. The words spilled out before I could stop them. She was still my mother and will be at the wedding. Everyone, including Ethan, turned to gaze at me with amazement. His mother raised her eyebrows and his father grimaced, and I could tell they felt I was making a mistake. But I couldn't take those remarks back now. Ethan drove me home after supper without saying anything. Just the sound of the automobile engine and the radio playing something soft that I couldn't concentrate on. We parked into my apartment parking lot, and he switched off the car but did not move to exit. Just sat there looking at the steering wheel. He questioned if I wanted Catherine to attend the wedding or if I was doing it because I felt obligated to. I opened my mouth to respond, but realized I didn't know what to say since I'd spent so much time being furious with her that I hadn't considered what I really wanted. He turned to face me and told me that it was fine to uninvite her if it made me feel safer on our wedding day, and that his family would understand and support whatever decision I chose. I told him I needed time to think about it, and he nodded, kissed my forehead, and promised to contact me tomorrow. I walked inside and laid on my couch for hours, looking at the ceiling, replaying the dinner in my thoughts and trying to figure out what I was feeling behind all the fury. 2 days passed in which I scarcely left my apartment, ordering meals and sitting with my phone in hand, looking at Catherine's contact information. I reflected on all the times she had humiliated me, all the boundaries she had broken, and all the ways she had taken advantage of my misery. But I also considered what would happen at the wedding if Mom wasn't present, how everyone would wonder where she was and why, and how the entire day would become about her absence rather about me and Ethan beginning our lives together. I grabbed my phone and contacted her before I could alter my mind. She answered the first ring as if she'd been waiting, and I informed her she might attend the wedding, but there would be tight rules. No conversation, no jokes about me or our family, and if she drank too much my cousin would accompany her away without question. She instantly consented without fighting or making excuses. And the fact that she didn't fight me about it frightened me far more than if she did. The wedding planner contacted me 2 days later when I was at work, and I could detect stress in her voice before she told me why she was calling. She stated that Catherine had approached her personally regarding microphone access during the reception, seeking to know the technical configuration and the ideal moment to utilize it. I felt wrath rush through my body, making my hands shake because Catherine had practically guaranteed me 2 days before that she would not deliver a speech. I left work early and drove directly to Catherine's apartment, not even calling beforehand, since I knew if I warned her, she'd make an excuse. She opened the door in sweatpants, her hair a mess, and I pushed past her into the living room. When I challenged her about phoning the wedding planner, she raised her hands and claimed she only wanted to perform a song for us. It wasn't a speech, but rather a musical homage. I told her I knew she was lying, and that she was organizing a show that would make everyone talk about her again. I stood in her disorganized living room, comic notes strewn about, and warned her that if she did anything during the wedding that brought attention to herself, I would never talk with her again. She burst into tears, claiming that I was being harsh, that she simply wanted to celebrate her only daughter's wedding, and that I was treating her like a criminal. I didn't move or soften my voice. I simply stood there and informed her that her celebrations had always meant embarrassing me, and I wouldn't let it happen again. She fell into the couch, burying her face in her hands. And for a split second, I nearly felt awful before recalling the engagement party and how she'd played up my suicide attempt for laughs. I left without saying goodbye and drove to Ethan's apartment to tell him what happened. Ethan listened to everything and then recommended that we hire security for the wedding, particularly to control Catherine. And, despite how stupid that sounded, I knew it was vital. His parents phoned him while I was present. And after he described the issue, they volunteered to pay for protection since they didn't trust Catherine after what had transpired. I consented because I recognized I needed to preserve my wedding day, even if it meant viewing my own mother as a threat to my pleasure. We spent the remainder of the evening researching security providers and discussing the problem, and I felt both relieved and extremely saddened that this was what my life had come to. 2 days before the wedding, I received a message on social media from Sam, one of Catherine's comedy pals who had attended the fictitious bachelorette party. He said he wanted to speak with me about something important and suggested we meet for coffee. I nearly disregarded it, but something about the message piqued my interest, so I agreed to meet him near my apartment. He arrived looking uncomfortable and guilty, swirling his coffee for a full minute before informing me that Catherine had been contacting all of her comedy pals to invite them to the wedding and support her. He stated it appeared she was preparing something, and he wanted me to know that he felt awful for not speaking out about her conduct sooner. I thanked him and exited the coffee shop, my stomach sinking because I knew Catherine would do something regardless of how many limits I placed. I drove directly to Catherine's apartment again, not waiting for her to invite me inside before confronting her about bringing her comedy pals to my wedding. She broke down entirely this time. Not the phony crying she typically performed, but genuine ugly sobbing that made her entire body quiver. She said that she couldn't stand being alone at an occasion where everyone condemned her, that she knew she had wrecked our relationship, but she was still my mother, and she was frightened of being cut out from my life. I stood there watching her break apart, feeling uneasy since it was simpler to despise her when she was simply being horrible. However, this weakness made things more challenging. She claimed she didn't know how to attend my wedding without her pals as a buffer. She was afraid of addressing Ethan's family alone after everything she had done. Ethan and I had an emergency appointment with our therapist the next day, and I confessed that I was afraid of becoming Catherine, someone who harms others and then excuses it. The therapist helped me understand that understanding this anxiety distinguished me from Catherine, who never questioned if her acts were wrong or considered how they affected others. Ethan leaned over and grasped my hand, telling me he loved and trusted me, but he wanted to know I wouldn't use his vulnerabilities in the same way Catherine had mine. I promised him I wouldn't, and I meant it. But I also knew I had crossed a boundary by revealing Catherine's secrets at the bogus bachelorette party, and I needed to figure out how to be better than that. We ended the session with a wedding plan and limits for Catherine, but I was still concerned about what may go wrong. The night before the wedding, I sat at my kitchen table, a blank piece of paper in front of me. Ethan was at his parents' house for a pre-wedding custom that his family followed. So I had the flat to myself. I took up the pen and set it down 3 times before I began writing. The letter came out untidy and honest, something I couldn't do face-to-face with Catherine. I suggested she could attend the wedding with one of her comedy friends who would help keep her grounded rather than urging her to act. I stated that our relationship was shattered and I wasn't sure if it could be repaired, but I was prepared to try if she could respect actual limits this time. I emphasized that I wanted freedom to grow in my marriage without continuously worrying about being used as material for her next set. The last line was the most difficult because I had to accept that some part of me still desired a mother, even if Catherine could never be the one I needed. I sealed the envelope and placed it on the counter, intending to drop it off at her apartment in the morning. I couldn't sleep that night because I kept picturing her face at the faux bachelorette party where I revealed all of her secrets. I worried if I'd gone too far, or if she'd finally grasp what it was like to be humiliated in front of loved ones. The morning of the wedding, I was in my bathroom attempting to fix my makeup when someone knocked on my apartment door. Ethan wasn't meant to pick me up for another 2 hours, and the wedding planner had my itinerary down to the minute. I opened the door to see Catherine standing there with my letter in her hand. Her eyes were crimson, but not in the typical dramatic way. She seemed smaller, as if she had been deflated. She asked if she might come in, and I nearly answered no, but I moved aside and allowed her enter through to the living room. She sat on my couch, holding up the letter, her hands trembling slightly. She informed me she had read it 4 times and understood what I was saying. She had spent her entire life using comedy to avoid dealing with true emotions. Her voice cracked when she stated she was going to start real treatment, not the type in which she acted for the doctor or cut her sessions into pieces. She said that she did not expect me to forgive or trust her, but she wanted to strive to be better, even if it was too late for us to have a regular mother-daughter relationship. I paused at the door, unsure what to say because it was the first time Catherine had apologized without making excuses or turning it into a joke. She wiped her eyes with the back of her palm and said she was proud of me for setting limits but wished someone had taught her how to do so when she was younger. I told her she had to leave so I could continue getting dressed, and she agreed and walked out the door. Before leaving, she turned and announced that she would be sitting quietly in the 3rd row with Olivia, who had promised to be her support person for the day. The wedding ceremony took place in a garden site chosen by Ethan's parents, with white seats arranged in rows facing a flower-covered arch. I stood in the bridal suite with my bridesmaids while the organizer gave everyone their signals. My stomach flipped every time I thought of Catherine sitting in the audience. Ethan's mother had scarcely spoken to me at the rehearsal dinner, and his father kept throwing me concerned looks, as if he expected anarchy to break out at any time. The music began, and I walked down the aisle, staring at Ethan's face rather than the guests. Catherine sat in the 3rd row, precisely where she said she would, wearing a modest blue dress instead of the white sequined one she had purchased months before. Olivia sat next to her, her hand on Catherine's arm, and while Catherine's face was soaked with tears, she remained totally motionless and quiet. The ceremony was wonderful in a manner I hadn't expected, with Ethan speaking his vows and me saying mine without interruptions or performances. Catherine approached. Ethan's parents at their table, and I observed her from across the room during the reception. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I saw her speaking without her normal expressive motions or efforts at comedy. Ethan's mother's face remained frigid and tight, but she nodded as Catherine finished and replied briefly. Ethan's father shook Catherine's hand in a formal manner, indicating that they were not immediately buddies, but at least they were polite. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not precisely forgiveness, but rather the first step toward being able to breathe without continuously fearing the next calamity. 6 weeks after our wedding, Catherine and I began meeting for coffee every Thursday morning at a location midway between our residences. The first few meetings seemed awkward and stiff, with both of us being very cautious about what we said. I had established a list of topics that were off limits, things she couldn't ask about or use as comic fodder, and she really obeyed the guidelines without complaint. She informed me about her therapy sessions in a genuine way, without faking or exaggerating for effect, simply discussing what she was learning about herself. She acknowledged that her therapist had pointed out that she'd used humor as a weapon to keep people at arm's length, that if she made them laugh or startled them initially, she wouldn't have to risk genuine connection. I listened but did not offer forgiveness or comfort. Just let her speak and process without making it about myself. She inquired about the wedding, and I gave her the details that seemed comfortable to disclose. She did not interrupt or make jokes. Our relationship would never be normal or straightforward. The damage was too severe and extended back too far. But I was learning that defending myself didn't have to entail fully destroying her, and that I could set limits without seeking vengeance. Ethan and I were starting our lives together in our new apartment, making plans for the future without the continuous anxiety hovering over us. I still trembled when my phone rang and I saw Catherine's name, concerned she'd fall back into her old habits. But for now, having coffee once a week with defined guidelines seemed feasible, and that was plenty. I was finally free of waking up every day worried if I'd be her next punchline. And that independence was more valuable than any apology she could offer me. My parents called me the spare twin. They said, "Your sister is the one." Years later, she begged for my inheritance, and I had proof to destroy her. I'm Ethan, a 23-year-old guy who was always the extra kid my parents kept around until they found out someplace else to put me. My sister was the golden kid, while I was essentially the family's spare part. Years later, she contacts me with a foolish request. My folks join in, and things take a very amusing turn. Let's just say I had the final laugh. It may or may not have included a mop, a blue outfit, and my attempt not to pass out from laughter. From the start, it was clear who was the show's star. My twin sister, Chloe, 23, is a female with blonde hair, green eyes, dimples, and all the characteristics of an angel kid that people adore. Every time someone saw us, they said, "Oh, she's gorgeous." Then they said, "And that's her brother." As if I was her driver or something. My parents, John and Rebecca, ate it up. If Chloe just burped softly, she was elegant. If I did anything, it would be lethargic, uninspired, and problematic. And I am not exaggerating. One year for Christmas, she received an iPad, while I received socks. Not great socks. Clearance socks. 2 sizes are too small. They relished pointing out that I had darker complexion than Chloe. She inherited her mother's fair complexion and her father's fair eyes. I got me. Guess which one goes better with their family photo style? Spoiler. Not the youngster who was advised to stand in the rear so the light wouldn't wash out your sister's face. Growing up, I was the designated errand guy. If they needed someone to clean the garage, it would be me. It's Chloe's time to clean dishes. No, she had homework, so I completed them. Family excursions. Oh, I was invited, but only to carry baggage and photograph everyone else having fun. What still makes my eye twitch is that I was never permitted to be in some family photos. They'd make 2 versions, one with Chloe front and center and one with just her. My version did not exist. The day they finally decided they were done with me was almost hilarious. I was 14. Chloe was 14. We each had an upcoming school concert. I didn't want to wear the itchy, too tight outfit my mother chose for me. I expressed my discomfort and requested if I might change into something more comfortable. That is it. That is the crime. I didn't want to appear as if I was headed to court for tax fraud. Mom had a complete meltdown. Dad backed her up, stating I was ungrateful and humiliating to the family. The next thing I know, they're saying, "You know what? Maybe it's better if you go live with Uncle James and Aunt Laura for a while." That while turned into forever. Here's the bit that makes things worse. They did not disguise the motive. A week later, I overheard my mother on the phone stating, "We chose to keep the better child. That's me they're referring to." Or more accurately, not me. Uncle James and Aunt Laura, Dad's brother and wife, were shocked. They were not wealthy, but they were nice people. When they picked me up, they assured me that I would have my own room and space, and that I would not be treated like luggage. My parents scarcely said goodbye. Chloe waved at me from the porch, as if I were going on a school trip. My mother's final words were, "Don't cause them as much trouble as you caused us. No hugs. No, we will miss you. Just one final stab to remember them by." The first night with Uncle James and Aunt Laura made me understand how different my life may be. They inquired whether I was hungry. They never compared me to Chloe once. They didn't care what I was wearing as long as it was clean. They treated me like I was a member of the family, which felt strange at first because I wasn't used to it. But the problem was that even after I left, my parents found methods to remind me that I was the reject. They'd send me cards for Chloe's birthday with photographs of her as she grew older, but no mention of me. My favorite was when they sent me a family photo with me clipped out. You could still see my hand resting on Chloe's shoulder. Classy. I used to believe it may be me. Maybe I was the problem kid. But living with James and Laura taught me that I wasn't. It turns out that if you treat a child as if they are important, they will behave accordingly. So, it is how I became the spare twin. There were no spectacular judicial custody fights or sad catastrophes, just two parents who decided which child looked better on their Christmas cards. And really, that was the finest thing they could have done for me. Because while Chloe was being nurtured as the golden kid, I got out. I got to live with individuals who didn't mind how I appeared in images. And one day, I was going to make sure that their decision to discard me was the one that came back to hit them the worst. So I thought moving with Uncle James and Aunt Laura would be the end of it. They kicked me out, so why should they care what I did? Yeah. It turns out that my parents were not the kind to let things go. They were the sort of people who would put something in the garbage and then complain because the trash didn't send them thank you cards. That Christmas marked the beginning of their strange behavior. James pulls in a bundle of mail and gives me a card with my name on it. I open it, and there's a beautiful photo of my parents and Chloe in matching sweaters hugging a golden dog I'd never seen before. Large lettering on the front. "Merry Christmas, from our ideal family." My name was not even printed inside, only a Sharpie. Message. "You would look better in this photo if you worked harder. Merry friggin' Christmas." Then they got inventive. On my 16th birthday, a box arrives. Inside there is only one cupcake. There is no icing or message, just a candle shoved in the middle. And I realized right away that they hadn't remembered my birthday. It was their way of saying, "You're not worth an actual cake." Another time, a padded package arrived, containing a present. My antique third-grade participation ribbon, charred on the edges. I suppose they felt it would really stick it to me. This item was not for me. It was for them. They weren't attempting to reconnect. They weren't even attempting to harm me in a way that made sense. They simply wanted to ensure that I never forget I was the rejected one. It was only about malice. The oddest thing was that the harassment was planned. I'd get something from Chloe, then from Mom a week later, and finally from Dad. Like they have a harassing schedule posted on the fridge. Someone even mailed me a flash disk. I plugged it in. A huge error. And there came a slideshow showcasing Chloe's accomplishments. School accolades, holiday shots, her carrying trophies, all set to this goofy, inspiring music. I couldn't go through it without laughing. By the age of 17, it had become physical. They showed up twice. This is the first time I have come home from school. James stands on the porch clutching a large framed photograph. My parents had just left it there. It was an updated family picture. Only the three of them and the dog. In the frame behind the glass, pasted in the corner, was a little baby photo of myself with a red X through it. Second time I'm walking home. I see a vehicle parked at the corner. Chloe is leaning out the window, carrying a large sign that reads, "Need money? Ask your real family." A couple of school kids were behind me. They witnessed everything. Chloe waved as if she were at a parade. I didn't even react, just continued going. I think my lack of concern irritated her more than anything. The final straw arrived a few months later. A parcel shows up. Big, hefty box. I open it to reveal a shoebox, full with dirt and debris. On top of the soil was a message that said, "This is all you'll ever be worth to us." James almost phoned the cops. I advised him to not bother. I didn't want them to assume they had received a response. But in my thoughts, I made an essential decision. I wasn't just going to cut them off. I was planning to maintain receipts. Every insult, every petty prank was saved until the day when I could finally use them. By that point, James and Laura were saying, "They're not going to stop unless you cut every line of contact." So I did. New phone number, privacy settings on school records, and mail routed to a P.O. box. For over a year, everything was calm. No cards, no parcels, and no parade stunts. I nearly believed they had finally moved on. But here's what I've discovered about individuals like my parents and Chloe. They aren't reaching out because they miss you. They're reaching out because they want something, and when that something reappeared years later, it was accompanied by a phone call from Chloe, who pretended to be our closest friend. I could tell it was terrible news before I even picked up. I changed my phone number years ago following the dirt in a box farce, so she must have sweet-talked a cousin, or guilted a relative into giving it to her. First and foremost, seeing her name on my phone was similar to having the IRS audit department appear on your caller ID. You're not receiving good news. Second, I had not heard from her in years. She was carrying that large "need money, ask your true family" sign out of a vehicle window when she last contacted me. So, while I wasn't anticipating a heart-to-heart, curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see what angle she was taking this time. I respond. Her voice is sugary, sweet, false, and happy, similar to how the Kardashians talk. Yes, that tone. "Hey, it has been forever. How are you?" I play along. "Let me guess. This call concludes with you begging for money." She chuckles as if I was joking. "Oh, stop. Seriously, I've been thinking about you. We should catch up." Which is Chloe speak for, "I want something." I just wasn't sure what it was yet. We do the awkward dance for around 2 minutes. Her chatting about her busy life, and my quick responses. Then she moves in for the kill. "So I heard Uncle James received some money from Grandma and Grandpa." Bingo. I maintain a bland tone. "Yeah, they left a trust in my name, which James maintained. He recently moved it to me a few months ago, so it is now mine. Well, I just thought, since we're twins, it would make sense to divide it." I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. "Divide my inheritance? That is adorable." She did not laugh back. "I am serious, Ethan. We are family. The family shares." I could feel my jaw clench. "Funny. You refused to share when I was having supper alone in the kitchen, allowing you to sit at the nice table." "God, you're so theatrical," she exclaims, suddenly switching to the tone she used as a child. The one that made everything I said seem insane. "It's about doing the right thing. I need this money for college." "Oh," I answered. "You mean the college you might have paid for with the funds your parents set up? The one Mom told James about before I learned from a cousin that you spent it on handbags and a vacation to Italy." Silence. That hit. Then she snaps back. "That was different. I was living my life. You have had it easy with James and Laura. You don't need that much money." The arrogance made me chuckle again. "Let's get this straight. You squandered your own education funds, and now you believe you are entitled to mine. Since I had a nice life with people who genuinely wanted me." "You are being selfish," she says. "If our roles were reversed, I would assist you." "Oh yes," I said. "It's strange because when I requested to borrow your graphing calculator in high school, you advised me to purchase my own, but now I'm expected to support your entire future." Her voice changes from pleasant to harsh. "If you aren't going to do the right thing, maybe your parents should talk to you." I smirked. "Go for it. Haven't talked to them in a while. Should be fun." Click the button. She hangs up. 45 hours later, my phone begins to blow up. First it's my mother, then my father, and finally an aunt I don't recall meeting. All using the same script. "It is your responsibility to support your sister. You wouldn't have the same life without us. Without them, the same folks who abandoned me at their brother's house as if I were a broken toaster." One voicemail from my father stated, "You're still my son, so I have a right to ask this of you." Which was funny because the only time he's ever used the words on me is when he's trying to guilt trip me. One even provided me a link to a GoFundMe page Chloe created titled, "Help me get to college, my brother won't help." The description was pure gold. My twin brother was granted a large quantity of money, but he refuses to share with me. Even while he understands how essential my education is, he has had it easy his entire life, whereas I have fought. Last summer the girls' fight took place at an all-inclusive resort in the Maldives. The greatest part? The GoFundMe page included a photo of her standing next to a BMW. I wasn't furious at this time about her BMW. I was impressed. Chloe's entitlement was not merely typical golden kid enthusiasm, it was Olympic level. It takes confidence to spend your own money, beg for someone else's, and yet act like you're the victim. James and Laura were about to contact her and shut it off, but I persuaded them to hold off. Something inside of me had moved during that phone chat. I'd been cutting them off for years to escape their mess. Now I wanted to lean into it, not because I was going to hand them a penny, but because Chloe had just given me the ideal situation. She was blatantly lying about the reason she needed the money. My parents were backing her up like the devoted little enablers they'd always been. And here I was, armed with both physical and digital receipts, demonstrating she was lying. Instead of rejecting their calls, I began answering them, allowing them to rant while pretending as if I was contemplating the situation. I preserved everything of it. Screenshots, voicemails, and a GoFundMe link. I even had a common friend email me images of her gloating about her Italy shopping trip and Maldives vacation in a private group conversation. It wasn't simply about money anymore. It was about ensuring that everyone received precisely what they earned. That night, Chloe texted me one more time before remaining silent. In a way, I am receiving what I deserve. I grinned at the phone. Yeah, I figured you would. Just not in the way you expect. See, people like Chloe and my parents don't know when to give up. If you let them think they're tiring you out, they'll just keep talking. And the more they talk, the more ammunition they provide you. So I choose not to block them. I decided to let the pandemonium in just long enough to get what I needed. The following morning, Chloe phoned again. I could see she had been practicing her reasonable voice. Ethan, I just want to work things out. I'm not asking for it all. Just enough to cover the tuition. Uh-huh. How much is sufficient? I inquired, knowing full well that the amount would be outrageous. She did not disappoint. 45,000. But that's only the start. There are also books, housing, and personal well-being. I cut in silence. Then he said, "How do you know that?" I replied, "I'm psychic." She huffed and changed the subject, but I could sense the worry in her tone. That informed me she understood she'd spoken too much elsewhere and was curious where I'd heard it. Meanwhile, my parents were doing their own campaign. My mother tried the "I'm just concerned" tactic. "Chloe is quite stressed, Ethan. You have always been the strong one. You can live without this money, but she cannot. Be a bigger person. You're not the golden kid, thus your life is intended to be more difficult." I knew I needed to keep them talking. So I began asking questions. So, if I helped, what precisely would the money be used for? I'd make it sound like I was thinking about it, then sit back and let them probe further. They emailed me spreadsheets. Actual spreadsheets. Chloe had created a college budget file, complete with color labeling. Tuition and books accounted for around 20%. The remaining expenses included a $6,500 wardrobe update, $3,500 for networking events and reading parties, and $10,200 for mobility upgrades, which was code for a new automobile. I transmitted the material to myself using 3 separate email addresses. I was not going to lose that jewel. About a week into this, I received a text from a mutual buddy. One of those folks who want to remain impartial yet enjoys a little of drama. She provided me photos from Chloe's private Instagram, posts of her visiting high-end stores, and selfies with titles like, "Manifesting my dream car." No one can tell me I can't have the life I deserve. Gold. Pure gold. I began to see the wider picture. Chloe expected this to be a brief guilt trip and a paycheck. My parents believed they could continue to put pressure on me as they had done in the past. None of them understood they were giving me enough information to destroy their reputation in one shot. But time was important. You do not simply drop all of the ammunition at once. You wait until they've progressed to the point where dropping it is not only pleasurable, but also irrevocable. So I continued giving them just enough hope to keep them talking. I mean, maybe I could help with some of it. I will think about it. Let me see how much I can save after my own costs. Every time I stated anything like that, Chloe's text became nicer. My mother began sending me texts saying she was thinking about you. My father even inquired about my employment as if he cared. It wasn't real. Everything was wonderful. Then Chloe made her first major error. She gave me a photo of a fancy handbag she recently purchased, claiming it was an investment item for interviews. The $1,500 tag was still on it. The sting was that she sent it while simultaneously messaging me about how broke she was and how she didn't have enough money for textbooks. I did not react. I've just saved it. 2 days later she made another error. She announced on Instagram that she was going a weekend getaway with pals to unwind before the semester began. The setting was a 5-star resort, and the caption said, "Self-care is essential to success." I did not answer either. Saved it. By this point, I had screenshots of her shopping sprees, proof she wasted her initial college fund, the crazy college budget file, and her parents, my parents in name only, publicly supporting her entitled crap in messages and voicemails. All I needed was one more thing. A strong indication that they were not going to stop until they were publicly shamed. It arrived in the guise of a group message. Chloe added me, my parents and perhaps 6 other relatives to a chat called Family Support. She began with, "I'm reaching out," so everyone could hear how Ethan refuses to help his twin sister with her future, despite having more than enough to improve her life. My mom said, "We're just asking for fairness. He's been blessed and should share." That was all. The ideal configuration. They had made it public among the family. They'd drawn their line, and they had no clue I was standing on the opposite side with a match and a gallon of petrol. When I lighted this up, I determined right away that I wasn't going to turn them off. I planned to make sure they couldn't twist it later. No misconceptions. No, it is not what we intended. Only their words, behavior, and entitlement are on full show. Once it was out there was no turning back. They intended to make it public. Fine. I was planning to make it permanent. I took a big breath, accessed the family support group chat, and began typing as if I were ready to submit a final paper that I was confident would receive an A. First message. Okay, now that we're discussing freely in front of everyone, let's make sure we all have the same knowledge. This is Chloe's comprehensive college budget proposal. I then attached the spreadsheet she had supplied me. You could almost hear the group conversation halt for a collective double take. Next message, you'll notice that just 20% of this is for college. The remainder is $6,500 for apparel, $10,200 for a mobility upgrade, and $5,000 for personal health, which based on her receipts likely includes facials, yoga retreats, and even a membership to an influencer's lifestyle course. Then I dropped the handbag image, which still had the $1,500 tag on it. This was bought yesterday. I'm not sure how this comes into the struggling student category, but maybe it's a textbook holder. There was a brief moment of silence in the talk. Then my mother gets in. That isn't the point, Ethan. The point is, you have been blessed. I interrupted her with an Instagram screenshot of Chloe at the 5-star resort. And here's a quick self-care excursion from last weekend. It must be tough to manage college applications with poolside mimosas. Oh wait. I am not permitted to discuss the alcohol. My fault. The conversation begins to spiral out of control. A handful of cousins depart the gathering quickly. One aunt sends an eye emoji. My father attempts damage control. Ethan, this is needless. We are family. So I reached for the throat. I included documentation from a common acquaintance that shows Chloe talking in a private group conversation about how she had already spent her original college fund on Italy and the Maldives. Along with her exact words. "It's okay. I'll just ask Ethan to pay for the remainder. He owes me anyhow." I captioned it. "So just to be clear, I owe you because when I was 14, our parents dumped me on James and Laura so they could keep the more attractive one." I want to be sure I grasped the rationale. At this point, the group conversation was more than simply uncomfortable. It was nuclear fallout. My phone started buzzing as if it were attempting to flee the table. Relatives were DMing me individually, claiming they had no idea or had always sensed something was wrong with Chloe's stories. Chloe finally responded in the group. "You're taking everything out of context. That wasn't what I meant." I laughed out loud when reading it. Out of context? She actually stated it out in the correct context. So I struck them with the finisher. Here is the context. "Chloe, you are not getting paid. Mom and Dad, you taught her to believe she has the right to whatever she wants, and now you're startled that it's backfiring on you. You could have left me alone, but you came after me, and now you have the entire family watching. This is the final time I will react to any of you. Goodbye." I then quit the group. It felt fantastic. It's like walking away from a trash fire that you didn't start but definitely completed. But I wasn't finished. I shared the identical proof, every screenshot, file and photo to the opposite side of the family, who had not participated in the discussion. I didn't want Chloe or my parents to think Ethan was being cruel or making things up. Nope. The receipts were bulletproof. Within 24 hours, Chloe's GoFundMe page had been erased. Not because she had met her aim, but because the remarks were harsh. One cousin even shared the entire screenshot album in the comments. So, anyone who clicked the link saw the entire tale before even reading her proposal. People started sharing links to the screenshots I'd given, claiming she was a fraudster. Someone even posted a college fund, which is more like a vacation fund. James and Laura were unable to stop smiling for a week. James even prepared popcorn one night and claimed, "This is better than Netflix." The best thing is that Chloe hates losing face. She may have simply accepted the L and gone on. Instead, she doubled down and tried to convince some family that the images were outdated or manipulated. However, the timestamps and information in the screenshots immediately disproved that deception. Every time she attempted to get out of it, someone else provided me her reason, and I showed them proof that she was lying again. Her reputation in the family plummeted quicker than a bad cryptocurrency. Party invitations are no longer available. My mom's proud parent posts about her are vanished. Even her pals began unfollowing her online, and I didn't even have to raise a finger after the initial explosion. The problem merely continued to expand on its own. It was no longer about money. It was all about control. For the first time, they had nothing on me. They couldn't blame me, alter the facts, or disguise what they'd been doing for years. I had turned their small public shaming effort into a career-ending PR disaster. All I had to do was give them their own words back. I assumed that was the end of it. However, I misjudged how desperate entitled individuals can get when the gravy train failed. Because a few months later, when their financial problems became apparent, my parents showed up at my door. Not to shout, guilt trip, or plead. And that was the finest moment of all. Picture it. Saturday afternoon, I'm in sweats, halfway through a dish of leftover lasagna, and watching a guy on TikTok describe how to remodel a 1-meter room using just galvanized steel. Life is calm. Then knock knock. Not the casual sort. Not a neighbor stealing sugar knock. This was sharp, fast, and desperate. I look out the window and almost drop my fork. Mom and Dad are on my porch. For a moment, I thought they were presenting an apology basket. You know, one of those pricey arrangements with nice cheeses and perhaps a small letter saying, "Sorry for being trash, parents." But nada. They were standing there in clothing that looked like they had been slept in, with expressions that suggested someone had just seized their souls. I opened the door halfway because I am not foolish. Wow, the better child is busy today. So you choose to slum it? Dad attempts to chuckle. Ethan, come on. That is not essential. Oh, this is vital. I asked them, so, what brings you here? Forgot my birthday again and wanted to make up for the last 20 years? Mom jumps in, clasping her hands as if auditioning for a church choir. We have made errors. We are aware of this. But we are still family, and family should end there. I cut her off since the last time I heard the term family from you, it was followed by a request for money. And based on your expressions, this isn't a social call. They share a glance that suggests they were trying to warm me up before telling me why they drove here. Finally, Dad says something. We were in a difficult place. I lean against the doorframe. A tight situation. Did Chloe purchase too many personal wellness packages? Mom sighs, as if she was the one who had been mistreated. The residence is under foreclosure. We've had some bills mount up, and your sister is right on time. Chloe walks up from the driveway, wearing designer sunglasses and clutching a coffee cup the size of her head. Hey Ethan, she says as if she were welcoming a waiter. She is about to stiffen on a tip. I grin. Well, assuming that isn't the subject of the GoFundMe scammer documentary. What's up, sister? She ignores it. We are just here to discuss. Things have been difficult and you have the resources to aid us. There it was. Not even suited up this time. Just give me your money. I tilt my head. You're correct, Chloe. I do have the resources and I am utilizing them for my own benefit. I know, it's a crazy notion. Dad takes a step forward, as if he is attempting to recover fatherly authority that he never earned. We are requesting an interest-free loan to help us get back on our feet. I laugh. You've been on your feet for years. They've just stepped on everyone else's toes. And now that you've tripped, you want me to be your crutch. Mom attempts the guilt trip next. We took you in as a newborn. I'm sorry, I interrupted. You gave me away to James and Laura because I did not fit the Christmas photo style. Let us not change history. Chloe scoffed. God, you are so theatrical. It's only money. You act as if we are asking for your kidney. Yes, I say. But notice the difference. If you removed my kidney, you'd probably sell it and then come back begging for the other one. Dad's jaw tightens. We're giving you an opportunity to be the greater person here. I smirk. I've been the bigger person since I was 14. You were all too busy polishing Chloe's halo to notice. They're all standing there now, shuffling uneasily, understanding that their old approaches aren't working. So Mom abandons her pretense of humility and plunges headfirst into desperation. If we lose our house, we won't have anywhere to go. Bummer, I say. On the plus side, taking family photographs is much easier when there is no furniture in the way. Chloe tries one more time. Please, Ethan, only enough to get us back on our feet. I vow I will repay you. I lock eyes with her. Oh, as if you were going to repay your original education fund or pay for your own vacations rather than setting up a GoFundMe to swindle family. Forgive me if your track record does not instill confidence. There is a long delay. Nobody is smiling anymore. Chloe appears ready to spew nails. Dad's face is crimson. Mom's eyes are moist, but not from grief, but from wrath because I am not folding. So I finished it. Calm, steady, and no yelling. You all made your decision long ago. You choose your favorite. You supported her even when she was incorrect. And you determined that I was expendable. Now you're standing here because you require anything from the disposable one. So here's my response. The same one you've given me all my life. No. And with that, I closed the door. I stood there for a second, listening. Nothing. No knocking. There was no yelling. Just the sound of footsteps returning to the car. Then the engine starting. I went back to my lasagna. And let me tell you, it was delicious. Life after closing that door on them was calm. Quiet in the best possible manner. No unexpected knocks. No guilt-trip voicemails. And no strange family group chats attempting to conduct an intervention for my conscience. Just me, James, Laura, my goals, and the bequest, which belonged entirely in my account. I didn't boast about it. Not because I was the greater person, but because the enjoyment did not require an audience. I knew that was enough. But the world chose to give me an encore. It was Friday night. I was out with two companions to a nice mid-range restaurant with no graphics on the menus and servers who act as if they developed the specials. We just finished eating a dish of appetizers. When I got up to use the restroom, as I walked down the hall by the kitchen entrance, I noticed a mop handle hanging out of a yellow bucket. Then I spotted her. Chloe, hair wrapped back in a bun, had lost the fight hours before. Blue janitor suit, rubber gloves, sweeping the tile floor with the same zeal as someone removing graffiti from a gas station wall. I froze. Then, without trying, I burst out laughing. You can't fake this laugh because it's the result of genuine amazement and delight crashing in your chest. She looked up and suddenly turned pale. Oh my God, she whispered, attempting to turn her face away. No, don't hide, I responded, immediately taking out my phone. Blue truly suits you. Honestly, this looks better than the Maldives bikini photos. Delete that, she said, pointing to my phone as I took the first image. Click. She attempted to step behind the mop bucket, but I joined her. Come on, sister. Only one for the family album. We can put it next to the one where you held up the necessary funds. Request that your immediate family members sign. Click. Click. Her jaw clenched. Ethan, I swear to God that you swear a lot. I cut in as if you were going to pay back your college fund. As if you would not spend money. As if you'd receive what you earned. It seems like you did. A few of diners on their way to the restroom slowed down and looked at her. Then at me. I gave them a shrug and stage whispered. We had a family reunion. She's in her work clothes. Chloe blushed red. She shouted something I couldn't hear before sprinting through the swinging kitchen doors, dropping the mop in the middle of the hallway. I stood there for a second, simply beaming. Then I snapped one more shot of the lonely mop bucket and returned to my table as if nothing had occurred. Of course I didn't save those photos for myself. I forwarded them to my two closest cousins, the same ones that were in the family support chat when I dropped off the receipts months ago. By the time I arrived home, one of them had created a side-by-side meme. On the left, Chloe poses in Italy with shopping bags. On the right, Chloe in her blue janitor outfit is labeled, "Living the life she deserves." The next day I awoke to a torrent of texts from her. Delete those images right now. You are obsessed with damaging me. I will sue you. I responded with a thumbs up emoji. That is it. A few hours later, Mom phoned. I didn't respond. Then Dad called. The same outcome. Then they attempted calling from a blocked number, which went directly to voicemail. I saved that one without listening. I did not need to hear the script. I already knew it was some combination of "you've gone too far and we're still family." They didn't understand that this wasn't going too far. This was precisely how far I wanted to go. This was not about vengeance for anything they had done. It was about allowing them to live in the reality they had created while periodically going by to admire the vista. Chloe had lived her entire life believing she would always be on top. That someone, whether it was me, my parents, the family, or someone else, would step in to save her, no matter how badly she fouled up. Seeing her in that outfit, scrubbing floors, and knowing there was no rescue on the way was better than any bogus apology she could have given. When I exited the restaurant that night, I passed by the kitchen doors again. Chloe was back at her position, head down and avoiding eye contact. I didn't pause, didn't say anything, just let my laughter trail behind me like perfume, since blue truly suits her. My parents never noticed me. On my 21st birthday, they gave my brother a watch. I left that night. My dad called 2 weeks later. Please, come back. I was 19 when I began counting down the days until my 21st birthday. Not because I was eager to become an adult, but because I knew it was the day I could finally go. My name is Ethan, and I grew up in a house that appeared picture perfect from the outside. 2-story white shutters, a large oak tree in the front yard, but inside it always felt like I was inhaling someone else's air, as if I was a visitor in a house that didn't want me. My brother Luke is 3 years younger than me. And he has always been the golden boy. I don't mean this in a petty older brother sense. I mean, he could actually slam the family car into the mailbox and people would inquire if he was all right. Meanwhile, I once neglected to vacuum before supper and was grounded for a week. Growing up, I learned how to live quietly. I did not want to give them an excuse to be furious. When I stepped into a room, the tone of my father's voice changed, tight and clipped, as if I were an unsolved problem. My mother wasn't doing any better. She didn't shout, but she had this way of gazing straight through me, as if I were someone else's child who had stumbled into the wrong house. Luke, on the other hand, had that effortless grin, charisma, and knack for being at the right place at the right time. He was a miraculous baby after a string of miscarriages. He was the one that made it. I believe my parents decided right then and then that he was unique, and everything else disappeared. Still, I tried. I had decent marks. I remained out of trouble. I worked part-time stacking shelves at the grocery store to save money for college since I knew they wouldn't help. Every time the subject turned to my future, my father would just grunt and say, "You're smart. You'll figure it out." Luke, on the other hand, received a new laptop for his 16th birthday since he required it for school, even though he spent most of his time playing games and scrolling TikTok. I recall asking my mother if I could borrow it once to fill out college applications. She said, "Ask your brother." I did. He said no. So, when my 21st birthday finally arrived, I wasn't expecting anything. Perhaps a card or a family supper. I hadn't even expected a present. I simply needed, I don't know, a minute to appreciate that I'd survived 21 years in a house that barely tolerated me. That they may have seen me. My birthday fell on a Saturday that year. I didn't have to work, so I got up late and came downstairs expecting someone to wish me a happy birthday. Instead, I found my father in the kitchen wrapping a knot around a sleek black box and Luke bouncing on his heels like a child on Christmas morning. I stood there, half drowsy, observing this little exchange between them as if I were intruding. My mom smiled and said, "Perfect timing, come on Luke. Open it." Nobody glanced at me. Nobody even noticed that I hadn't spoken yet. Luke ripped open the package and let out a phony gasp, as if he had just won the jackpot. Inside was a silver expensive-looking watch with a leather band and Roman numbers. "Oh my God, Dad, this is very sick." Luke grinned as he slipped it onto his wrist. "Now I don't need to borrow your old one." My father chuckled and ruffled his hair. "Well, you deserve it, child. You've been working so hard recently." Hard. The kid's biggest success that week was reaching second base with a female from his chemistry class. I gazed at them, motionless, hoping that someone would recall why the day was important. My mother eventually looked over at me and said, "Ethan, don't look so bitter. It's not always about gifts. When you get older, you'll realize that what matters is who you become, not what you get." It hit me like a slap. She stated it in that calm, condescending tone she often used when she tried to appear intelligent, as if I were some greedy kid who didn't understand. I attempted to nod along, but my throat clenched. "I thought we were having cake," I murmured. "Oh, we did it before," Luke remarked nonchalantly. "I blinked while you were asleep. Did you have cake without me?" My mother promptly answered. "It was just a small thing. Nothing major." "Whose name was on it?" The stillness was just a beat too long. Then Luke grinned and said, "Mine? I mean, it was a cooperative effort. But it is not your birthday." "Don't be dramatic," my father yelled. "It's only a cake." I wanted to shout. I wanted to chuck something. Instead, I laughed. It was harsh, short, and did not sound like me. I laughed because if I didn't, I'd weep right in front of them, and I didn't want to give them any satisfaction. Luke lifted an eyebrow, as if I were the crazy one. My mother gave me this expression of sorrow and despair, as if I had ruined a perfectly fine day. That night, when I walked up to my room, I didn't even switch on the light. I sat on my bed for a long time, gazing at the floor, and attempting to swallow the knot in my throat. I maintained my thoughts. They're never going to love you the way you want them to. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how hard you try. You're never going to be Luke. I finally decided to act. I grabbed my bag and packed it with a hoodie, a water bottle, a couple granola bars, and the $50 I'd hidden in an envelope in the back of my sock drawer. I did not have a plan. Not really. But I had my ID, a phone charger, and a bus timetable that I had covertly printed from the library weeks earlier. At midnight, when the house was quiet and everyone was sleeping, I snuck out the back door and didn't look back. I expected to be gone for a day or two. Maybe stay in the refuge near the downtown church. Maybe look for a part-time work or couch surf if I can find someone nice enough. I did not know. I knew I could not remain. What I didn't anticipate was that 2 weeks later, my phone would ring with a number I hadn't seen in days. My dad. I let it ring the first 2 times, then on the third, I answered. Before I could say anything, his voice broke through, choked up and just above a whisper. "Your room's still here," he said. "Please pick up, just tell me where you are. Please." I sensed something had changed. I just wasn't sure what or why, and the bit that terrified me the most. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to go back. I did not go back. Not that week. Not the next. And not after the voicemail. My father departed 2 days later. This time, quieter and angrier. "I don't know what you think you're proving, Ethan, but this isn't how family works. You don't just vanish." That line made me giggle a little. Ironic, given that I had spent my whole life feeling like a ghost in that mansion. I remained gone. I bounced around. First there was the church shelter, followed by this little room for rent managed by Lynn, a retired mechanic with a soft heart for stray dogs and humans. I gave him what I could afford, $130 per week for a mattress in the corner of his garage, which he had walled off with plywood and curtains. It smelled of grease and iron, yet it was warm. And for the first time, I didn't have to follow someone else's rules in order to live. I obtained part-time employment unloading trucks at a shipping warehouse and spent the rest of my time filling out college applications at the public library, whose computers timed out every 30 minutes. I did not inform anyone where I was. I didn't want them to locate me until I had something to show for it. But they ultimately found me. It was Luke who arrived first. I was heading out of the library one afternoon when I noticed him resting against a vehicle that was clearly too lovely for him. New model with beautiful black paint and leather seats. He had not noticed me yet. He was glancing at his phone, seemed bored. I froze. My impulse was to turn and flee, but curiosity kept me in place. He noticed me a second later and smirked, as if I were late for an event I had no idea I had been invited to. "There you are," he said, sliding his phone inside his jacket. "You look like crap, bro." "Thanks," I replied bluntly. "Seriously though, Mom's freaking out. Dad's being weird. You made your point. Okay, come home." "I'm not coming home." He looked at his wife. "Come on, man. You had your little tantrum. Now everyone's waiting for you to crawl back so things can go back to normal." The term normal struck me like a brick. "You mean where my birthday cake had your name on it?" I requested an explanation. "That kind of normal?" He shrugged as if I had brought up the weather. "It was just a mix-up. You always take things so seriously. They didn't mean anything by it." "You're right," I told them. "They never mean anything by it. That's the problem." His smile faded. Look. I don't know what kind of sob story you're telling yourself, but you're not the only one with problems, okay? You don't see me running away. No, I told you, you just see the world bending to make sure you don't have to. That hit home. His jaw stiffened. Whatever. Just know that when you finally come back, don't expect a parade. They've been bending over backwards trying to reach you. I nodded slowly. Yeah. Did they tell you what they said the night I left? He did not respond. I did not expect him to. Tell them I'm fine, I said, moving away. And if they're really so worried, they can stop calling my number and start thinking about why I stopped picking up. After a week or two, I began to hear less from them. No more voicemails or texts. I assumed they'd given up and moved on, most likely converting my bedroom into a storage area, a mini home gym, or whatever project they could think of to fill the stillness. I assumed that was the end of it, until I received an email. Not from my parents, but from my high school counselor, Mrs. Duro. It was brief and uncomfortable, as if she wasn't sure whether to be worried or polite. She expressed her wish that I was safe and well, but she wanted to inform me that my transcripts had been requested and revoked. According to the system, my parents called the school and informed them that I would not be attending college, and that all further application communication should be cancelled. I sat there in the library, gazing at the screen and not breathing. I read it again, then a third time. They attempted to eliminate me. I contacted the school right away, my pulse hammering, and happily, Mrs. Devo answered. I described everything. She verified it with an apology, but it was evident she had not heard the entire tale. I spent the following 2 days untangling the mess and ensuring that my applications were not damaged. Several deadlines had already passed. I passed up a scholarship offer that I had a legitimate shot at. That night, I did not sleep. I kept replaying the email in my brain, thinking what type of individuals go out of their way to stifle their own child's potential. It was no longer about control. It was sabotage. I didn't seek vengeance, not yet. What I wanted was to disappear so completely from their story that one day they'd have to explain to someone why their firstborn son never returned home. But fate had other ideas. Because 1 month later, I received a letter in the mail. An actual letter, paper and envelope with no return address, only my name written in my father's handwriting. Inside, there was no apology. There was a list, a genuine bullet-pointed list of things you had to complete before we could speak about you returning home. It had gems such as, stop blaming others for your unhappiness. Apologize for walking out and ghosting your family. Recognize the sacrifices we made for you. Understand that we do what we do out of love. I read it silently. Then I laughed, because what else could I do? It was not a letter. It was a contract. Another method to make me the issue. A technique to entice me back into the cycle of guilt, responsibility, and performance. I crumpled it, threw it in the garbage and told myself for the umpteenth time that I was finished. But then came a moment that altered everything. It happened in the early spring. I'd started working longer hours at the warehouse to save for community college. When Lynn entered the garage one evening with a hefty packet, he claimed someone had been by earlier, inquired whether Ethan lived here and gave it over without saying anything. I opened it gently. Inside was a legitimate legal letter from a lawyer's office. It said that I was being removed as a dependent from my parents' tax records retrospectively. That I was no longer regarded a member of their household and that I had until the end of the month to retrieve any remaining personal stuff from their property before it was disposed of at the homeowner's discretion. There was a sticky note attached. The only thing it said was, "This is what consequences look like. Sign, Mom." That was the switch. I felt something inside me stiffen and solidify. It wasn't rage. It was not even sadness. It was clarity. They didn't only want to injure me. They were attempting to eliminate me. And if they wanted to play that game, they had no clue who I was going to be. I didn't talk for 2 days after receiving the letter. Lynn noticed. He did not press me. He just passed an extra sandwich across the workbench over lunch and said, "Whatever it is, kid. It won't last forever. Not if you don't let it." I nodded, but I didn't believe him. Rock bottom may not necessarily appear like a catastrophic fall. Sometimes it's simply silent, a deep aching that stays in your chest and never goes away. It's going home from a double shift, fingers aching, boots drenched, and realizing you don't have a house, only a garage with no insulation and a curtain for privacy. At 3 a.m., it is sitting in the cold room. With your hoodie pulled over your face, you realize your family has written you off as a terrible investment. They weren't quite finished with me. They punished me for leaving. I didn't even have anything to return for. A few clothing and a shelf of books I had accumulated over the years. My guitar if it hadn't already been sold or discarded. But even so, I felt hollow. Knowing that my name, space and existence in that house were being washed clean as if I were a blemish on their flawless family image. Worst of all, I nearly broke down. That week, I skipped 2 shifts. I didn't respond when Len knocked. I didn't check my email, eat much, or sleep. I just laid there, listening to the wind blow against the garage door, wondering what I was doing now. But then something silly rescued me. A book. No, not just any book. My book. I believed I had lost it during the transfer. It was buried in the bottom of my rucksack, a dog-eared copy of John Cracker's Into the Wild. I have read it 3 times previously. But that night, I flicked it open and came upon a statement I had marked in red ink years earlier. Happiness is only real when shared. It should have made me feel bad. Instead, it made me sit up because I realized I was attempting to share my life with people who did not want it. I continued sending away bits of myself, expecting that someone would say, "We see you, you matter." But they never did. That is not the family I was born into, and I couldn't change them, I could only alter myself. The next morning I returned to work. I apologized to my boss for missing shifts and volunteered to take the graveyard position for the following 2 weeks to compensate. He didn't ask any questions, just growled and handed me a credential for the nightly staff. The task was tougher, with heavier boxes and colder nights, but I didn't mind. I needed it. That was the start of my reconstruction. Quiet, uncomplicated, and mine. Over the following 6 months, I settled into a groove. Wake up, work, read, sleep, and repeat. I started saving every additional money. To save money on my phone bill, I downloaded budgeting applications, eliminated superfluous expenses, and even quit using data. Len noticed and began assigning me more duties in order to gain credit toward rent. Sometimes he'd give me a $20 and claim it was for groceries, as if I hadn't just cleaned his entire vehicle engine. I applied to community college again, this time without the support of my parents, and paid the application cost on my own. I sobbed after submitting a brutally honest essay. I did not sugarcoat anything. I talked about growing up unseen, how silence can speak louder than words, and how you can create yourself from scratch when no one gives you the tools. Things gradually began to change. One night, while scrubbing the warehouse floor, I overheard 2 logistics employees grumbling about a shipment software error. I'd learned a little coding through an online course I'd been taking. Nothing significant, simply a free Python class, but I provided a solution anyway. They dismissed it at first, but 2 days later, one of them grabbed me aside and said, "Hey, that thing you mentioned, it worked." Before I knew it, I was unofficially the man people went to when their computers stopped, or their printers went berserk. I didn't get a promotion or a title, but people started remembering my name, thanking me and seeing me. It was a strange feeling. The type of strange that makes you sit with it for a while and think, maybe I'm not just background noise. My first significant triumph occurred in early summer. I received an email from the community college. Accepted with a scholarship too. Not a full ride, but enough to cover tuition if I continued working part-time. I recall looking at the computer, repeating the word congrats over and again, as if it might vanish if I blinked too hard. Lynn allowed me to use his kitchen that night to prepare a packaged cake. It turned out uneven and little scorched, but I didn't mind. I used blue icing to write my name on it. Ethan is just Ethan. There was no communal celebration, no forgotten candle or lecture. It was just me. A dilapidated garage was the first thing I'd ever made with my own hands. I did not call my parents, I did not tell them, but I figured they'd figure it out eventually since people speak, especially in our town. And sure enough, one day at the grocery store, I ran across an old neighbor, Mrs. Langford, a sweet lady who used to slip me cookies when my mother wasn't looking. When she spotted me, she smiled broadly and said, "I heard you're going to college. Your mom must be so proud." I just nodded and muttered, "Yeah, must be." But I knew otherwise. They were not proud. They were presumably upset that I had done it without them. And I was fine with it since their approval was no longer the currency I needed. Later that week, I received a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was my mother. She did not weep. She did not shout. She just responded, "We heard about school. I'm glad you're doing well, and I hope you remember where you came from." I played that phrase 5 times, as if I were a straying stray who needed to return to his kennel. But I didn't feel furious. I felt liberated. By the end of the summer, I had moved out of Lynn's garage. I found a shared apartment near university with 2 housemates who stayed to themselves and did not ask questions. I began schooling and secured a part-time IT position at the school's help desk. It was not glamorous, but it paid the bills. And gradually, I began to construct something resembling a life. I still had emotional wounds. I still cringed whenever people raised their voices. Still questioning praises. Still found myself apologizing for taking up space. But I was learning. Healing is not loud. It is not always dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as having coffee in a quiet room and recognizing you're no longer frightened to be noticed. One night, I opened a fresh notebook and jotted down a list of realities, things I'd learned, things no one could take from me. At the top I added, you don't need permission to be someone they never imagined. And under it, your worth isn't measured by someone else's disappointment. You can start over, even when they say you can't. Family isn't who you're born to, it's who roots for you in the quiet. I closed the notebook, turned off the light and slept better than I had in years, but I should have known it wasn't over. Because just when I thought I was finally free, something happened that pulled me right back in. It started with a message request. Late one night, I was reviewing my notes for an upcoming midterm, sitting on the floor of my apartment with a half-eaten burrito and 3 open tabs on laptop troubleshooting. Mrs. Langford, my parents' old neighbor, the one with the garden that used to spill into our backyard, was always kind but distant, friendly in the way that suburban neighbors are. I hadn't used Facebook in months, if not longer, and had only kept the account open in case of emergencies or identity verification. I hadn't spoken to her in years, and the message was simple. Hey Ethan, I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but I thought you had the right to know. Your parents listed your childhood home for sale and the sign just went up this week. I hope you're doing well. I stared at the message, then reread it. The house was up for sale. Our house. For a second, I didn't feel anything. Just blankness. Then something flickered. Not quite sadness, not quite anger, but something else. Something sharper, colder. I'd always assumed they'd sell eventually. That once Luke graduated or moved out, they'd downsize or relocate to some gated community with a warning label on the HOA newsletter. But the fact that it was now, after everything, after cutting me off, after pretending I never existed, something about the timing didn't feel right. So, I did what any reasonably curious person would do. I opened Zillow. It didn't take long to find the listing, which was a bright, overexposed photo of our front porch. The white shutters were cleaned up, the old oak tree was still casting a crooked shadow across the lawn, and the description was flowery and fake, a charming family home with rich character, lovingly maintained for over 2 decades, with 4 bedrooms, custom finishes, and a quiet neighborhood. I scrolled through the photos, living room, kitchen, master bedroom, and bedroom 1, and clicked. My breath caught. They'd turned my room into a guest suite, with neutral walls, beige bedding, and generic art prints on the walls. Every trace of me was gone, no posters, no desk, no shelves, no indication that someone had spent 18 years growing up in that space, as if I'd never existed. They didn't just push me out. They erased me. That's when the idea began to form. That weekend, I borrowed a collared shirt from my roommate, printed a fake pre-approval letter using a free online template, and booked a tour through the real estate site using a burner Gmail. I wasn't looking for vengeance at the time, but rather curiosity. I didn't know what I was expecting when I pulled up to the curb in a borrowed car, maybe a rush of emotion, nostalgia, bitterness. But mostly I just felt numb. The porch creaked like it used to, and the front door still had the scratch near the bottom where I'd once tried to sneak in a stray cat, and the real estate agent, a perky woman named Sasha with 2 white teeth, had no idea she was walking through a landmine. So the sellers are really motivated, she chirped, looking for a quick close. They've already moved most of their personal belongings out, looking to downsize now that their youngest is off to college. I nodded politely, letting her guide me from room to room. I barely listened. My focus was on the walls, the spaces, the energy, and the gaping absence of me. When we got to the backyard, I paused. The fence was newer. Luke must have helped build it, or at least posed for a photo while someone else did. The treehouse I'd built with my uncle when I was 12 and still had hope, was gone, ripped down. I'll give you a minute, Sasha said, sensing something in my silence. I nodded and walked toward the back fence, keeping my hands in my pockets to keep them from shaking. That night, I sat in my car long after the engine had cooled down. And I knew it wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was war. They wanted to pretend I never existed, which was fine. Then I'd make sure the world knew exactly who I was, and that they were the ones who lost me. I didn't want to burn down the house. That would have been too easy, too fast. I wanted something slower, smarter, and more permanent, so I began planning. The first step was research, and I spent the next week looking into property records, who owned the house, and what their finances were like. Using a few publicly available databases, I discovered something interesting. The mortgage wasn't paid off, and they were a few months behind, which raised questions about why they were selling. I filed that information away. I called Milo, an old high school classmate who used to run a tech club and now works freelance in cybersecurity. We weren't close, but I knew two things about him. He hated bullies and he owed me a favor from years ago when I covered for him during a plagiarism accusation. We met for coffee, and I put out a version of the tale, not the entire thing, but the main points. "What do you need?" he inquired. "I need access to the real estate records. Possible seller disclosures. Any correspondence that I can discover. I want to know what they're concealing." Milo cracked his knuckles. "Give me 48 hours. He finished in 36. My parents had listed the house without disclosing a major plumbing issue that had started in the basement, which could cost thousands of dollars to fix. The documents were forged, not just misleading, but also illegal. I saved every file, printed copies, and uploaded backups to encrypted cloud storage. The evidence was there, but I didn't want to blow it all at once. In the meantime, I contacted the college administration office to confirm something I'd been quietly working on for months. I was eligible to transfer into a full scholarship program due to my GPA and work-study contributions, and they invited me to speak at the fall orientation as a first-generation student. That's when the idea struck me. What if I invited them? Not directly, of course, but what if they saw me standing on a stage holding a scholarship certificate, announced to an audience as someone they'd given up on? And what if, right around that same time, the buyers for their house backed out and someone reported their fraudulent documents? What if everything they'd built their image on started to crack? Not because I screamed, but because I succeeded, because I smiled, and then made it clear that they were never part of the journey. That was the setup, and I wasn't done yet. I had one more card to play, a name, Luke. He was still their golden boy, their pride and joy, but I knew things about him that they didn't. Old screenshots, messages he sent from the school-issued iPad when he was 17, joking about borrowing money from my father's wallet and blaming the maid. I hadn't used any of it yet, but I would if they pushed, because I didn't need to ruin their lives. I just needed them to watch me build mine without them, brick by brick, speech by speech. Comments about not completing community service hours and having a friend sign attendance forms were minor until they were packaged together and handed to a college admissions committee. And then, when the moment was right, I dropped the match, quiet, controlled, undeniable, and walked away, not bitter, not broken, just free. I didn't want the ending to be loud, not a scene, not a tantrum, but quiet, measured, like placing the final stone on a grave, and that's exactly how it turned out. The first domino to fall was the house sale. I carefully timed everything, waited until the buyers had gone through inspection, financing, and all the drawn-out steps. And then I sent them a small anonymous package via a third-party forwarding service that guaranteed no return address. The flash drive contained images of the basement flooding caused by the old sump pump, screenshots of the fraudulent disclosure paperwork, and a penned message that said, "This house has a secret. The sellers did not repair it, instead, they covered it up. If you sign the contract, the problem is yours. Think twice. Ask the agent about the sump pump and watch what happens." The consequences were immediate. My parents, who were already behind on their mortgage, were about to face foreclosure if they couldn't find a new buyer in time, but they couldn't fudge the paperwork this time. Because the plumbing issue had been legally and publicly flagged. 3 days later, the house disappeared from Zillow and the listing went dark. I didn't even have to lift a finger after that, I just watched. Meanwhile, I said yes to the orientation speech, and the school had arranged for a local news crew to film parts of it for a segment on community success stories. I didn't expect it to be a big deal, just a 5-minute slot on a sleepy Sunday newscast. But what I didn't anticipate was the article. A few days after the orientation, someone from the city college board contacted me and asked if they could publish my story on their website. I said yes, expecting a paragraph, but they ran a complete profile, photo interview and everything. From Dawn to Dean's List, Ethan Lane's journey from abandonment to academic triumph was dramatic. It was a little too dramatic to be honest, but it was real, and it spread. People shared it. Old classmates, teachers, neighbors, and eventually, my parents. I found out through a second-hand Facebook comment that someone screenshotted and texted to me. This article is filled with exaggerations. Some kids just don't appreciate how much their family sacrifices for them, my mother said, passive-aggressive, anonymous enough to appear inconspicuous, but unmistakably hers. She was spinning, and I wasn't done yet because Luke, the golden child, had just begun applying to transfer institutions. And I still had those screenshots. I didn't want to ruin his future, but I did want to send a warning shot. So I sent a short anonymous email to the admissions office of the school he was aiming for, containing only a few lines about falsified community service records, a suspicious paper trail of attendance forms, and a history of academic oversights. I attached 3 old screenshots of him joking about it, and I signed it for the integrity of your academic program. It didn't matter if they acted on it or not. What mattered was that Luke would meet someone new and never feel untouchable again. Now here's what I didn't expect. They came to me separately, rather than together. First, it was my father, who arrived at the university assistant's desk one Tuesday morning, eyes bloodshot, tie loose, face weary. "Ethan," he started. "We need to talk." I gazed at him calmly and steadily. "You mean now that the house is unsellable and Luke's applications are falling apart?" I said quietly. He blinked as if he hadn't expected me to acknowledge it. "We didn't know it had gotten this bad," he told me. "You've made your point. Okay. We get it." "No," I said. "You don't. That's how it got this far." He attempted again. "We can fix it. Maybe come home. Let's talk this through." I smiled little and chilly. "There is no home," I said. "You burned that bridge and sold the ashes." Then I turned and went away. He did not follow. 2 weeks later, my mother sent me a letter. No envelope, just a piece of paper slid under the flat door in the middle of the night. "Ethan, I realize now that we committed mistakes, but you're being harsh. Punishing us like way doesn't make you better than us. Please, this is your family." "Mom." I did not answer. Instead, I tried something different. I emailed her a simple snapshot. I am standing in front of the college banner, carrying my scholarship award. Smiling. I added on the reverse. "This is what consequences look like." That was the last communication I ever sent to them. Since then, the house has been foreclosed on. Luke transferred, but not to the school he preferred. And my parents relocated to a smaller, older rental house 2 counties away, with a lawn they don't show photographs of. I, for one, am doing well. Graduated with honors. I started working with a group that assists first-generation kids in navigating college without the assistance of their families. I mentor children who feel invisible, just like I did. I have a new apartment, a puppy, a full fridge, and friends who have chosen me. And I have never had to look back. My vengeance was not loud. It did not come with slamming doors or shouting battles. It arrived with silent breezes, inexorable progress, and the type of success that you construct brick by brick while everyone else is looking for a collapse. The nicest thing is that they'll spend the rest of their lives pretending they didn't lose a son, whilst I'll spend the rest of mine never needing them again. I was not the disappointment in that house. I was the escape artist they never noticed. My jealous sister accused me of being a gold digger and tried to ruin my boyfriend's career. My parents took her side as always. Hello, everyone. I don't know where to start. I suppose I've always been the other sister. My name is Lindsay, and I'm 29 years old. I grew up in the shadow of my older sister, Melanie, who is now 34. It feels like my entire life has been spent trying to measure up to her, but I never could, at least not in my parents' eyes. Melanie has always been the golden child. I recall as a child seeing how easily everything appeared to fall into place for her. She was the star of every school play, the captain of her soccer team, and the straight-A student who my parents couldn't stop talking about. Meanwhile, I was simply Lindsay, the quiet one. The girl who enjoyed drawing in her sketchbook but did not shine in the ways that mattered to them. It wasn't as if I hadn't tried. I put myself into art because it was the one thing I thought I was good at. But even that wasn't enough. I recall one particular day well. During a parent-teacher conference, my middle school art instructor informed my mother that I had true talent and that if I worked hard enough, I might be able to receive a college scholarship. I felt very proud and excited. But when we arrived home, my mother replied, "That's nice, honey, but it's not like art is a real career. Melanie's already studying for the SATs. Maybe focus on something practical." This shattered me. I was 12. I did not wish to be practical. I wanted them to be proud of me, even if it was for reasons other than Melanie. But the favoritism did not end there. My parents gave Melanie every possible benefit. They paid for her piano lessons, individual tutoring, and pricey summer camps, which she didn't appear to like. When it came to me, however, the funding was tight, or so they claimed. I asked for painting lessons, even cheap ones at the community center, but they always answered, "No, we just can't afford it right now, Lindsay." They did, however, manage to finance a new car for Melanie when she reached 16. Regarding that car, here's a story that still makes my blood boil. On my 16th birthday, I convinced myself that this was finally my time. If Melanie gets a car, maybe they'll surprise me with one as well. Instead, I received a sweater. A sweater. I'm not ungrateful. I understand not every child gets a car. But what about the kicker? Melanie arrived home from college with a flat tire. And guess who got to wait and watch my father spend hours mending it while my birthday cake lay untouched on the counter? Happy birthday to me. And it's not simply the material aspects that sting, it's the emotional neglect. My mother constantly praised Melanie, saying things like, "You're so beautiful, you're so smart, and you're going to do amazing things." I can't remember the last time she said that to me. I was ecstatic to get my first job at a tiny graphic design agency. But my mother's response was, "That's nice, but when are you going back to school?" You know, Melanie got her master's degree. I tried talking to my father about it once. He's quieter than my mother and more passive. I asked him why it seemed like they loved Melanie more than me. He groaned, looked uneasy, and continued. "We don't love her more, Lindsay. She just needs us more." What the heck does that even mean? Is she in more need of them? She had everything handed to her. If anyone required assistance, it was me. As I became older, the gap between us widened. Melanie went on to greater and better things, an Ivy League degree, a high-paying job in finance, and a sparkling engagement ring from her equally beautiful fiancé. And me, I felt stuck. My art career didn't take off as I had hoped. And every time I saw my folks, they'd say, "So, what's next?" As if what I'd done so far wasn't enough. One of the most humiliating experiences occurred last Thanksgiving. Melanie and her fiancé, Jason, came over for supper, and my parents went all out, prime rib, fine wine, the works. I brought a pumpkin pie that I had made myself, which I was very proud of considering I am not much of a cook. When I placed it on the table, my mother gave me a tight little smile and said, "Oh sweetie, that's nice, but Melanie brought a cheesecake from that bakery downtown. Everyone loves their desserts." Guess which one was devoured first? Melanie not only receives all of the adulation, but she also appears to ignore it. She pretends not to notice the partiality, but I believe she enjoys being the center of attention. Years ago, I tried to confront her about it. I told her it was unfair that Mom and Dad treated us differently. She stared at me with wide-eyed innocence and said, "Lindsay, you're being ridiculous. Mom and Dad love us equally." Then she turned around and uploaded a picture on Instagram with the remark, "My parents are the best," over a shot of the new watch they bought her just because. I feel as if I've been gaslit my entire life. Every time I try to express my feelings, I am met with either denial or sympathy. "You're overreacting, Lindsay," or, "Oh, you poor thing," as if I were a frail little flower incapable of handling her feelings. It is exhausting. I've been growing increasingly distant from my family. I stopped coming to family gatherings and called my mother solely to learn about Melanie's recent successes. I've been focusing on my painting again, attempting to rekindle the passion I had as a child before their relentless comparison drained everything from me. But it's hard. No matter how much I try to remove myself, that voice in the back of my head continually screams, "You'll never be good enough." I guess what I'm wondering is, am I crazy for feeling this way? Is it inappropriate to want my parents to see me for who I am, rather than who I am not? Or am I doomed to live the rest of my life in Melanie's shadow? After years of feeling stuck, I eventually discovered what I considered to be a nice place. I'd been working as a freelance graphic designer, gradually developing a portfolio that I was proud of. It wasn't a glamorous job, but I adored it. For once, I felt in charge of my life, free from incessant comparisons to Melanie. That's when I met Zach. It was a random meeting at a small business exhibition that I attended to network. I was standing awkwardly near a kiosk, browsing through leaflets, when he approached me. He was tall, with dark hair that had just the proper amount of gray at the temples, and he exuded effortless confidence, which I noticed straight away. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," he replied, smirking. I laughed, slightly ashamed. "Is it that obvious?" He presented himself as Zach, the founder of a modest but thriving technology startup that creates software for small businesses. As we talked, I discovered that he was 36, self-employed, and had created his business from the ground up. Zach, unlike many of the folks I'd met at these occasions, was neither pretentious or overbearing. When I explained about my business, he listened and asked questions about my design process and the types of clients I dealt with. It felt refreshing. We kept in touch for a few weeks. Zach was more than just nice and charming. He was intelligent, ambitious, and truly interested in what I had to say. He asked me to create some branding materials for his company, and working with him was fantastic. He treated me as an equal, which was unusual for me after being dominated by Melanie for so long. When Zach and I started dating, it felt like a breath of fresh air. For the first time, I felt recognized, not as Melanie's sister or the less successful daughter, but as Lindsay. He wasn't concerned about my family dynamics or the baggage I carried. He cared for me. Of course, Melanie had to spoil it. At first, my parents appeared cautiously enthusiastic about Zach. They loved his success, though my mother couldn't help but make snarky remarks like, "Well, he's a bit older, isn't he?" Or, "I hope he's serious about you." Melanie, on the other hand, despised him from the start. I should have seen it coming. Melanie delights on being the center of attention, the one everyone envies. Zach's accomplishments made her feel threatened. She couldn't believe I'd found someone who was not only nice and helpful, but also extremely accomplished in his own right. So, in classic Melanie flair, she sought to instigate drama. It began quietly. Melanie mentioned during a family meal how handy it was that I met Zach while working on a project for him. "So, did you land the guy and the client?" she joked, loud enough for everyone to hear. I attempted to shrug it off, but the inference was clear. She assumed I was just dating Zach for his money. Things swiftly escalated after that. Melanie began spreading tales throughout our family, claiming that Zach was some type of sugar daddy. She even told my parents that I was exploiting him to escape my dismal career. "I just think Lindsay's rushing into things," she'd say, pretending to worry. "It's not like she's ever dated someone like Zach before. You have to admit, it's a big step up." What is the worst part? My parents believed her. My mother confronted me one night after dinner. "Lindsay," she asked, her tone concerned, "are you sure Zach is the right man for you? He's so established. I just don't want you to get hurt if this doesn't work out." "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "Zach and I are happy. Why can't you just let me have this?" Mom hesitated. "It's just..." Melanie mentioned some things. "Of course, she did," I added. "Because Melanie can't stand it when the attention isn't on her." I stormed out that night, but the damage had already been done. The seeds of mistrust had been sowed, and no matter how much I defended myself, it seemed as if my family had already made up their minds. The rumors did not end with my family. Melanie began sharing them around mutual friends. People I hadn't spoken with in years. One day, I received a phone call from Sarah, an old high school classmate I hadn't spoken with in years. "Hey, Lindsay," she said nervously. "I just wanted to check in. I heard some things about Zach and wanted to make sure you're okay." "Wait, what things?" I inquired, puzzled. Sarah hesitated. "Well, Melanie mentioned that Zach might be, controlling. She said you've been spending all your time with him and barely talking to your family anymore. I just wanted to make sure everything's all right." I was infuriated. "Sarah, that's not true. Zach is nothing like that. Melanie's just..." I paused, recognizing there was no use in explanation. Melanie had already caused harm. When I challenged her about it, she claimed to be the victim. "I was just worried about you," she explained, wide-eyed and innocent. "I didn't mean for it to get blown out of proportion. You know how people love to gossip. You're the one who started the gossip," I yelled. "Why can't you just be happy for me for once?" Melanie didn't care. She never does. All she cared about was bringing me down and keeping me in the shadow, where she believed I belonged. Throughout it all, Zach was my rock. "Lindsay," he remarked one night as we sat on his couch, "you don't owe anyone an explanation for our relationship. Not your parents, not Melanie, not anyone. The people who really care about you will see the truth." He could see how much it was hurting me and did everything he could to encourage me. I wanted to believe him, but it was difficult. Melanie's falsehoods made me feel increasingly lonely. Even some of my closest friends became distant, as if they didn't know what to think. It seemed like I was waging a lost battle, while Melanie was winning. But Zach was correct in one thing. Those who genuinely cared about me stood by my side. My best friend Emily was among them. When she heard what Melanie was saying, she quickly called me. "Lindsay, this is ridiculous," she said. Anyone who knows you knows you're not that kind of person. Melanie's just jealous. She can't stand that you're happy. Hearing those words meant more to me than I could convey. For the first time in weeks, I felt less alone. Zach, for his part, refused to be swayed by the reports. If anything, they only strengthened us. He saw through Melanie's tactics and refused to allow her harm our relationship. She can say whatever she wants, he told me. At the end of the day, the only thing that matters is us. He was correct. Melanie could spread as many stories as she wanted, but she couldn't take away what Zach and I had created together. For the first time in my life, I wasn't simply Lindsay, the other sister. I was Lindsay, the woman who had found love and happiness despite everything Melanie had thrown at her. I used to believe that things couldn't get worse following Melanie's initial rumors about Zach. I was mistaken. Melanie wasn't simply out to ruin my family's opinion of me. She launched her campaign on social media, dragging my name through the mud for all to see. It began softly, as many of Melanie's shenanigans did. She shared a photo of herself and her husband Jason, in front of their huge suburban home. The headline read, "It's amazing what you can achieve with hard work and dedication. Some of us don't need shortcuts." I realized it was about me. The timing was absolutely great. Zach and I had just shared photos from a weekend trip to Napa Valley, which Melanie would have undoubtedly seen. I attempted to ignore her posts, but they got more pointed. A few days later, another photo showed her holding an expensive handbag with the message, "Bought this with my own money, because, some of us don't rely on others to fund our lifestyles." The worst one, however, was a photo of her standing in her garden with a smug smile, holding a coffee cup that read "Girl Boss." The caption, "It's amazing how some people will do anything for a free life." Her friends and acquaintances chimed in, some even tagging me directly in their replies. I was upset, but I wasn't sure what to do. Part of me wanted to confront her publicly in order to defend myself, but Zach urged me otherwise. "She's baiting you," he remarked. "If you respond, you're giving her exactly what she wants." He was correct, of course, but that didn't make things any easier. Every time I opened my social media, there it was. Her smug expression, passive-aggressive captions, an army of accomplices. It felt like she was waging war against me, and I didn't even have a weapon to defend myself. A few weeks later, things escalated during a family meal. My parents had invited everyone over for what they called a relaxing evening. I should have known better. Nothing about being in the same room with Melanie could possibly be relaxing. Melanie was on edge from the time Zach and I stepped in. She welcomed us with a phony smile and an overly bright, "Oh, hi, you too." But her tone was tinged with sarcasm. She hardly acknowledged Zach, instead concentrating her entire attention on Jason, making a huge deal of questioning him about his career, their forthcoming vacation, and his plans to remodel their already exquisite kitchen. Dinner began uneventfully enough. My mother had prepared one of her hallmark dishes, roast chicken with all the fixings, and the discussion was primarily small talk. However, Melanie, ever the limelight seeker, felt it was time to stir the pot. She leaned back in her chair, whirling her wine glass like a villain from a soap opera, and said, "It's funny. I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and she mentioned how some people are living the dream of all money hunters." The table became silent. My father coughed awkwardly. My mother gave Melanie a warning glance, but she disregarded it. "I mean," she continued, her gaze riveted on mine. "Imagine finding someone who's willing to pay for everything. Your vacations, your lifestyle, even your career. Must be nice, right?" Zach stiffened alongside me. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, but I wouldn't let her see me crack. "Are you trying to say something, Melanie?" I inquired, keeping my voice as quiet as I could. "Oh no, of course not," she responded innocently. "I'm just making an observation. Some people have all the luck." "Luck has nothing to do with it," Zach interrupted, his voice low but forceful. "Lindsay works hard, and she doesn't need to rely on anyone to support her." Melanie smirked. "Oh, I'm sure she does. I mean, graphic design is such a stable and lucrative career path. I'm sure you don't help out at all, right?" "Enough." My mother's voice sliced through the tension like a dagger. "Melanie, stop it, this isn't appropriate." But Melanie wasn't done. She slammed her glass down with a bit too much vigor, the sound reverberating around the room. "I'm just being honest, Mom. Isn't that what we're supposed to do as a family? Be honest with each other?" I could not handle it anymore. I sprang up so rapidly that my chair almost crashed over. "Honesty? You wouldn't know honesty if it hit you in the face. All you know how to do is tear people down because you can't stand it when the spotlight isn't on you." "Lindsay, don't," Zach murmured calmly, placing his hand on my arm. But I was beyond the point of caring. Do you know what your problem is, Melanie? I asked, my voice quivering with wrath. You can't stand the fact that someone else might actually be happy for once. You thrive on making other people feel small because that's the only way you can feel big. Melanie's face flushed hot, but she did not answer. My father said something about everyone needing to calm down, but I didn't want to hear his half-hearted attempts at mediation. I grabbed my coat and turned to face Zach. Let's go. We went without saying anything, the tension in the room so heavy that I felt like I was suffocating on it. I burst into tears as soon as we arrived at the car. I can't do this anymore, I wept. I can't keep pretending everything's fine when she's destroying my life. Zach drew me into his arms, his words calming. You don't have to. You don't owe her or anyone else in your family anything. You've worked hard for what you have, and you don't need to justify it to anyone, least of all Melanie. He was correct, of course, but as much as I wanted to wipe Melanie out of my life entirely, I knew it wouldn't be that easy. She was more than just my sister. She was my parents' darling, the golden child. Cutting her out would also mean cutting them out, which I wasn't sure I was prepared for. The next few days were a jumble of emotions, rage, despair, and frustration. I blocked Melanie on all social media platforms, not wanting to see any more of her passive-aggressive posts, but the damage had already been done. Friends and acquaintances who had seen her posts were immediately asking questions, their tone tinged with thinly veiled condemnation. You're not actually dating him for his money, are you? One of them questioned me directly. No, I snapped. I'm not. But the stories lingered, and Melanie's shadow became larger than ever. No matter how hard I tried to get away, it felt like she was always one step ahead, ready to drag me down. After that horrible family meal, I knew I couldn't keep putting myself through Melanie's games. Every interaction with her seemed like a landmine about to detonate, and I was done falling into her traps. Zach and I talked about it, and we both agreed I needed to take a step back for my own sanity. I needed to set some boundaries, even if it meant missing family occasions. The first test came a few weeks later, when my parents said they would be having a cookout. It'll be fun, my mother stated over the phone, her tone far too enthusiastic. Jason and Melanie are coming, and you can bring Zach. We haven't seen you two in ages. I paused. I don't think that's a good idea, Mom. She heaved an impatient sigh that made me feel like a troublesome child. Oh, Lindsay, don't be like this. It's just a little barbecue. You're not still upset about what Melanie said, are you? Are you still upset? I asked incredulously. Mom, she basically accused me of being a gold digger in front of the whole family, and that's not even mentioning all the crap she's been posting online. Mom dismissed it with a giggle. Oh honey, you know how Melanie is. She doesn't mean half of what she says. You two just need to talk things out. No, Mom, I replied firmly. What I need is for her to stop attacking me every chance she gets. Until that happens, I'm not going to any event where she's present. There was a prolonged pause. Finally, she remarked. Well, I think you're overreacting, but if that's how you feel. It wasn't the answer I was hoping for, but she didn't go any further. Zach and I spent the weekend hiking instead, enjoying the solitude and quiet of the trails away from Melanie's toxic presence. But my absence was not unnoticed. A few days later, my father called, his tone pleasant but with that hint of disappointment I'd heard so many times before. Lindsay, your mother told me you didn't come to the barbecue because of Melanie. Is that true? Yes, Dad, I said, bracing myself for the scolding I knew was coming. Lindsay, he replied. She's your sister. Families fight sometimes, but that doesn't mean you just walk away. Your mom and I raised you both better than that. I felt a knot form in my throat. Dad, this isn't just a fight. This is years of Melanie tearing me down, and I'm not going to put up with it anymore. I have to protect myself. He exhaled. I get that you're upset, but don't let this destroy the family. You two need to find a way to work things out. Destroy the family? The word struck me like a punch in the gut. It was the same guilt trip strategy my parents had used throughout my life to keep me in line, and I was sick of it. I'm not the one destroying the family, Dad, I murmured, my voice trembling. If you want to blame someone, blame Melanie. However, he did not. He never would. Over the next 2 months, I stuck to my decision. I denied any invitations from my parents to events attended by Melanie. Let us know when you're hosting something without Melanie, I'd propose. They never did. Every time I turned them down, they'd say I was being harsh, Melanie was doing her best, and I was letting a minor misunderstanding destroy everything. What they didn't realize, or refused to recognize, was that this was not a misunderstanding. This was a pattern of conduct that had persisted throughout my life, and I was not going to continue submitting myself to it merely to keep the peace. The distance from my family was difficult, but it also allowed me to focus on myself. I immersed myself into my business, accepting new clients and developing my portfolio. Zach was my biggest supporter, always there to encourage me and remind me of my worth when I was doubting myself. Slowly but steadily, I began to feel like I was reclaiming my identity. Lindsay, the artist, the partner, the woman who did not want her family's approval to be complete. Melanie, on the other hand, was not satisfied with the status quo. One afternoon, my dearest friend Emily called me. "Hey, have you seen Melanie's latest post?" she inquired, her tone tinged with alarm. "No," I replied, my stomach sinking. "What did she do now?" Emily hesitated. "She posted this picture from your parents' anniversary dinner, and the caption said, 'Some of us actually show up for our family. Watch your family first.'" I groaned. "Unbelievable. She can't stand that I'm not playing her game anymore, so now she's trying to make me look like the bad guy." Emily sighed. "I know it's hard, but don't let her get to you. You're doing the right thing by setting boundaries." I wanted to believe her, but guilt was gnawing at me. Every time I saw a picture of my family without me, every time I heard my mother's disappointed tone or my father's angry sighs, I felt as if I had failed them. It didn't matter that I was defending myself. Part of me still craved their acceptance and validation. The breaking point occurred a few weeks later, when my parents asked Zach and me to supper. "It'll just be the four of us," Mom said. "No, Melanie, no drama." I reluctantly agreed. I wanted to believe they were finally listening to me and understanding where I was coming from. However, when we arrived, there was a fifth-place setting on the table. My heart fell. "Please tell me that's not for who I think it is," I requested. Before my mother could respond, the doorbell rang. Melanie strolled in moments later, smiling. "Oh, Lindsay, I didn't know you'd be here," she remarked, her tone full of feigned astonishment. I turned to my parents. "Are you serious? You lied to me." "Lindsay, please," Mom begged. "We just thought if you two spent some time together, you could work things out." I shook my head, tears of fury and betrayal welling up in my eyes. "You don't get it, do you? I'm not the problem here." "She is." Melanie gasped and clutched her chest in mock indignation. "Me? What did I do?" I could not handle it anymore. "You know exactly what you did, Melanie. You've spent our entire lives tearing me down, and I'm done pretending it's okay. I'm done being your punching bag." She smirked. "Oh, please. You're so sensitive, Lindsay. Maybe if you stopped playing the victim all the time, people would actually take you seriously." That was it. I grasped Zach's hand and turned to face my parents. "If you can't respect my boundaries, then I can't be part of this family anymore." My mother started to cry. My father seemed to want to say something but didn't know what. Melanie simply stood there, looking as smug as ever. As we walked out, Zach squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing," he replied. I wanted to believe him, but all I could feel was grief. For the first time in what seemed like an eternity, life was peaceful. Zach and I had discovered a rhythm together, a kind of sanctuary away from the drama that my family was continually causing. I was still separated from my parents and Melanie, but I felt no remorse. I'd spent too much of my life bending over backwards to please them. I was now focused on my own happiness. When Zach proposed, their happiness increased tenfold. We were on vacation and stayed at a beautiful home on a remote island. It was the kind of paradise I could only imagine. Pristine beaches, lush foliage, and a villa straight out of a tourist brochure. Zach planned the entire vacation as a surprise for our 2-year anniversary. He urged me to pack my luggage but didn't tell where we were going, just that it would be exceptional. The proposal took place on the second night, following a romantic dinner on the balcony facing the ocean. As the sun sank, the sky turned orange and purple, and the sound of waves breaking against the shore provided the ideal backdrop. I was savoring the scenery when Zach abruptly dropped to one knee, clutching a little velvet box in his palm. "Lindsay," he replied, his voice steady but full of passion. "The last 2 years with you have been the happiest of my life. You have shown me what it means to truly love and be loved. I hope to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" I was so overwhelmed that I could barely speak. As I nodded, tears flowed down my cheeks, and my heart felt like it was about to burst with excitement. "Yes," I eventually managed to say. "Yes, of course, I'll marry you." The ring was stunning, a basic yet elegant design featuring a single diamond that glittered like the stars above us. It wasn't gaudy or over the top, and I appreciated that Zach had chosen something so perfect for me. We spent the remainder of the evening partying, sipping champagne beneath the stars, and fantasizing about our future together. For once, I felt like my life was mine, not defined by my family's expectations or Melanie's shadow, but by the love and pleasure I'd created with Zach. When we returned from our trip, we began arranging the wedding. Neither of us wanted anything large or ostentatious. We both preferred closeness over show. We settled on a small ceremony with only 25 guests, close friends and family members who had been supportive of our relationship since the beginning. Melanie was clearly not on the guest list. My parents' invitation required a more hard decision. I struggled with it for weeks, divided between wanting them to be there and fearing the drama they may cause. Finally, I decided to accept them, but I made it clear that if they brought Melanie as a guest, they would be instantly uninvited. This is my day, I informed them honestly. I'm not going to let her ruin it. The site was ideal, a quaint winery secluded in the countryside, with rolling hills and scenic views. The wedding would be held in an outside garden, followed by dinner and dancing beneath a canopy of fairy lights. Zach and I collaborated closely with Amanda, a wedding planner who helped us bring our vision to life. She was a godsend, keeping things on track and making sure no details were neglected. Of course, Melanie learned about the wedding. I'm still unsure how. My parents said they didn't tell her, but I wouldn't put it past them to accidentally reveal it. Once she knew, the sabotage began. It all started with rumors. Melanie called up extended family members who hadn't been invited, explaining that I had purposefully excluded them because I thought I was too good for the family. She informed one cousin that the wedding was being held at a fancy, costly vineyard and that I was wasting Zach's money like it was going out of style. She's always been jealous of me, Melanie allegedly stated. This whole wedding is just her way of trying to one-up me. I learned about the rumors from my Aunt Karen, who contacted me one evening, apparently disturbed. Is it true, Lindsay, that you are not inviting anyone from your family except then your parents? She asked. Aunt Karen, that's not true, I exclaimed, my wrath boiling over. We are having a simple wedding, that is all. It's not about excluding somebody. It's about maintaining intimacy. Well, Melanie's been saying some things, she admitted. I just thought you should know. I thanked her for the heads up and hung up, my hands quivering in anger. Zach spotted me pacing the living room and grumbling under my breath. She's unbelievable, I complained. She's spreading lies about me to the entire family just because I didn't invite her to my wedding. Zach wrapped his arms around me, his calm presence grounding me. Let her say whatever she wants, he muttered. The individuals that matter understand the truth. Do not let her steal your joy. He was correct, of course, but it didn't make things any easier. Melanie's rumors sparked a chain reaction, and I soon found myself getting calls and messages from distant relatives demanding to know why they hadn't been invited. It was exhausting, but I wouldn't let it impede my plans. When the wedding day arrived, I was a bundle of jitters. Not because of Melanie. Amanda had informed me that the venue had strict security measures in place and that no unauthorized guests would be admitted, but because I wanted everything to be flawless. As I stood in the bridal suite, looking in the mirror, I felt a sense of peace come over me. My gown was simple but lovely, a flowing A-line with delicate lace embellishments and a soft champagne color. My dearest friend Emily stood alongside me, smiling as she adjusted my veil. You look incredible, she replied. Zach's going to lose it when he sees you. The ceremony was all I had imagined it would be. As I came down the aisle, my heart leaped when I saw Zach waiting for me, his eyes full of love and pride. We exchanged meaningful and highly personal vows, and when we said I do, there wasn't a dry eye in the yard. The reception was equally as wonderful. The meal was exquisite, the wine flowed freely, and the dance floor was filled with laughing and happiness. My parents behaved appropriately, though I could sense my mother was uncomfortable without Melanie. Still, for once, the spotlight was on me. Not on family conflict or sibling rivalry, but on the love Zach and I shared. As the night came to a close, I found myself sitting with Emily and a few other close friends, reminiscing on everything that had led up to this point. You did it, Emily remarked, raising her glass in toast. You stuck up for yourself and achieved pleasure. That is what matters. Following the wedding, Zach and I hoped Melanie would finally leave us alone. But of course, that was too much to ask. Instead, her toxic behavior worsened. She began spreading even more ridiculous accusations, not only about me but also about Zach. According to Melanie, Zach had a history of dominating his partners, had been sued for fraud in the past, and was using his fortune to influence me into separating from my family. Of course, it was all falsehoods, but the sheer arrogance of it was terrible. The worst aspect was that her lies began to damage Zach's professional reputation. One of his business associates, Mark, called him to inquire about the lawsuit. At first, Zach was perplexed. But when Mark mentioned that he had learned about it through a mutual acquaintance, It was evident that Melanie was the source. This was the last straw for Zach. He was not the kind to exacerbate situations unnecessarily, but this wasn't simply petty family drama anymore. It was defamation, and it was beginning to harm his livelihood. Zach decided to pursue legal action. He contacted his lawyer, Andrea, a no-nonsense woman who had handled his business contracts for many years. Andrea acted quickly when Zach explained the problem. "We'll draft a cease and desist letter immediately," she told me. "If she doesn't comply, we'll escalate to a defamation lawsuit." The letter was mailed a few days later. I hadn't seen it, but Zach assured me that it was clear and left no room for interpretation. It detailed all of Melanie's fraudulent assertions, requested that she stop making defamatory statements immediately, and warned that failing to comply would result in legal action. Zach's tone when discussing it was calm but forceful. "This isn't just about us, Lindsay," he told me. "People like Melanie won't stop unless forced to. She needs to learn that her actions have repercussions." Melanie did not take it well, as one could expect. The day after she received the letter, she called my mother in tears, accusing Zach of bullying her and attempting to destroy her life. My mother, of course, called me right away, her voice filled with guilt-tripping concern. "Lindsay, what is happening?" "Melanie claims Zach is threatening her with a lawsuit. Isn't that a little extreme?" "She's lying, Mom," I responded, attempting to remain cool. "Zach's not threatening her. He's urging her to stop telling lies about us. She, not him, is ruining people's lives here." "But she's your sister," my mother explained, as if that justified everything. "Can't you two talk it out?" "No, Mom," I snapped. "We tried that, and it obviously didn't work. This is more than simply family conflict, she's breaking the law. If you don't comprehend that, perhaps you're part of the problem." Mom didn't say much after that, but I knew she still supported Melanie. It stung, but by this stage, I was used to it. Melanie's life began to fall apart as the legal pressure increased. Her toxic behavior had alienated many of her friends over the years, and this current incident appeared to be the last straw for a few of them. I heard through the grapevine that numerous people had cut ties with her because they were tired of the continual manipulation and drama she introduced into their lives. Sarah, one of her closest friends, reached out to me. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for ever believing Melanie's lies," Sarah told me. "She's been saying nasty things about you and Zach for years, but now I realize it's all envy. She's toxic, and I can't be around her any longer." It was reassuring to hear, but also heartbreaking. Melanie had always been surrounded by people who adored her, yet her actions had caused her to lose many relationships. Now those bridges were crumbling one by one. She was also struggling financially. Jason, her husband, had lately lost his job, and without it, they were struggling to keep up their extravagant lifestyle. Melanie refused to downsize, claiming they could wait it out, but debts were piling up. Credit card debt, house bills, and the expenditures of living the fashionable lifestyle were catching up with her. Eventually, everything came crumbling down. Jason petitioned for divorce, alleging irreconcilable differences. According to what I heard, he had gotten tired of her continual desire for attention and refusal to accept responsibility for her actions. Melanie's situation deteriorated much further after her divorce. She lost her house and most of her belongings and was forced to move in with my parents. I wish I could feel sorry for her, but I don't. Melanie had spent her entire life putting others down in order to boost her own status, and now she was reaping the benefits. Even yet, it was difficult not to feel some residual anger when I heard my mother discuss assisting Melanie in getting back on her feet. "She's going through a tough time," Mom said one day during one of our few phone calls. "We're just trying to be there for her." "Of course you are," I replied, unable to hide my contempt. "Hasn't she always been your priority?" "That's not fair, Lindsay," Mom exclaimed, protective as usual. "She is your sister. Don't you worry about what happens to her?" "No, Mom," I replied simply. "I care about what happens to me and Zach, and I'm not going to let her drag us down with her." It was a harsh statement, but it was true. I'd spent far too much of my life thinking about Melanie, about how to deal with her drama and how to convince my parents of the harm she was creating. I was now focused on defending myself and the life I had created with Zach. Melanie appeared to fade away from my radar over time. The legal letter had worked. She ceased spreading lies about us, and we were finally at peace. Zach and I immersed ourselves into our profession and our relationship, creating a life founded on love and mutual respect. My relationship with my parents remained tense, but I had come to realize that certain things would never change. Every now and again, I received updates about Melanie from family members. She was still living with my parents and struggling to reconstruct her life. Part of me wondered if she'd learned anything from this, but I doubted it. Melanie is the type of person who rarely changes. Finally, I understood I didn't need her to provide me with closure. I didn't require an apology or recognition of the grief she had inflicted. What I needed to do was move forward, leave the past behind, and concentrate on the future. And this is exactly what I did. It took years, literally years, for my parents to understand what I had been attempting to tell them throughout my life. For as long as I could remember, they had overlooked, justified, and even glorified Melanie's behavior, regardless of how toxic or harmful it was. However, as the consequences of her acts became apparent, they were unable to ignore the reality any longer. I initially noticed the shift when on the phone with my father. Melanie had returned to live with them months before, and I had kept my distance. My parents periodically tried to contact me, but our chats were difficult. This time, however, my father sounded different. Tired and worn out in a way I had never heard before. "How are you doing, Lindsay?" he inquired, his tone surprisingly mild. "I feel like we haven't really talked in a while." "I'm fine, Dad," I replied cautiously. "Busy with work, you know." There was a gap before he sighed. I wanted to say I'm sorry." The words took me off guard. "I'm sorry for what?" "For everything," he said. "For not listening to you and not noticing what Melanie was doing. Your mom and I have discussed how badly we have let you down." I wasn't sure what to say. For years, I had imagined hearing those words, my parents finally admitting the pain they had caused by continuously side with Melanie. But now that the moment had arrived, it seemed strange. "Dad," I asked softly, "what brought this on?" "Melanie," he acknowledged. "Getting her back in the house has been eye-opening, to say the least. The way she speaks to your mother, the way she blames everyone else for her problems, it is tiresome. It has made us realize that we have allowed her to get away with far too much for far too long. Part of me wanted to be vindicated, but largely I felt tired." "I appreciate the apology," I responded. "But it doesn't change what happened." "I know," he replied swiftly. "I do not expect it to. I just wanted you to know that we see it now, and we apologize." A few days later, my mother called. She was never as forthright as my father, but her message was consistent. "We didn't do right by you, Lindsay," she admitted, her voice thick with sorrow. "We ignored Melanie's behavior because it was simpler than confronting it, and as a result, we damaged you. I'm very sorry." Hearing their comments was a step forward, but it did not alleviate years of sorrow. I told them so. "I need time," I explained. "This isn't something I can just forgive overnight." They appeared to understand, and for the first time, they didn't try to force me to move quicker than I was willing to. Not long after, I received a letter. It came from Melanie. Seeing her handwriting on the envelope filled me with dread. I hesitated whether or not to open it, but my curiosity won out. The letter was long, many pages of carefully written text, and as I read it, I couldn't help but feel a range of emotions. Melanie apologized for everything, the lies, the manipulation, and the years spent undermining and making me feel tiny. She stated that envy drove most of her actions, but she did not go into detail about what she was envious of. She apologized for spreading stories about Zach, causing tension at family events, and capitalizing on years of favoritism. "I know I've hurt you in ways I can't undo," she wrote, "but I want you to know that I sincerely apologize. I've done a lot of reflecting, and I realize how toxic I've been, not only to you, but to everyone around me. I don't expect you to forgive me, but maybe someday we can start over." Reading her remarks, I felt a glimpse of something I couldn't quite place, perhaps relief, or maybe optimism. But, overall, I felt cautious. Melanie's past behavior had taught me not to take her comments at their value. A single letter, no matter how passionate, was insufficient to repair the damage she had done. I showed Zach the letter that evening, and we discussed it during supper. "Do you believe she means it?" I asked. He thought for a moment. "Maybe. But even if she does, you don't have to accept her back into your life." "I know," I replied. "I just don't want to make the wrong decision. If she is serious, perhaps I should give her a chance." "Giving her a chance doesn't mean jumping back into the relationship as if nothing happened," Zach told me. "You can take it slow, set boundaries, protect yourself." He was correct, of course. If I was going to look into the prospect of restoring a relationship with Melanie, it had to be on my terms. For the following 2 weeks, I tucked the letter away in a drawer, reviewing it sometimes but without answering. I was not prepared, and I did not want to rush into anything. Meanwhile, my parents continued to work on repairing our relationship. They called on a frequent basis, not to guilt or pressure me, but to simply check in. It was a minor but significant difference, and I appreciated it more than I let on. Melanie had recently begun visiting a therapist, according to my mother. I think she's really trying to change, she told me. She's been talking about all the things she wants to do differently, how she wants to make amends. That's good, I remarked warily. But I'm still not ready. I understand, Mom murmured, and for once, she appeared to mean it. Months passed, and I began to experience a feeling of closure, not because I had forgiven Melanie or repaired our relationship, but because I was finally enjoying life on my own terms. I was doing well in my career, my relationship with Zach was better than ever, and I had surrounded myself with people who genuinely cared about me. My connection with my parents was gradually improving, and while not ideal, it was a step in the right way. I eventually decided to write Melanie back. My letter was brief and to the point. I thanked her for her apology and acknowledged her efforts, but I made it clear that I required time and distance. If we're ever going to rebuild our relationship, I declared, it has to be on new terms. Terms that respect my boundaries and my well-being. I had no idea how she would react, and honestly, I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for her approval or attempting to please her. I was living for myself, which felt liberated. In the end, I recognized that forgiveness isn't about condoning someone's behavior or pretending the damage never occurred. It's about releasing yourself from the weight of that pain and choosing to move forward in a way that preserves your serenity, which is exactly what I plan to do. Life has a tendency of shocking you when you're least expecting it. After years of struggling with my own issues, dealing with family dysfunction, and questioning my worth, I suddenly found myself in a position where everything was fitting into place. Not because life had suddenly become flawless, but because I had stopped striving to meet everyone else's expectations. Professionally, my graphic design career was flourishing. Over the years, I developed a strong portfolio and received praise for my work. The true turning point came when I entered an industry competition with a campaign I produced for a sustainable fashion firm. I had thrown my heart and energy into that project, creating a visual identity that reflected the brand's essence while also pushing the boundaries of what was considered traditional design. When I received an email alerting me that I had won the coveted International Design Excellence Award, I couldn't believe it. At first, I assumed it was an error. I must have read the email a dozen times before it sank in. Winning that prize was more than just a recognition of my abilities. It reminded me that I could achieve greatness on my own terms. The ceremony was held in New York City, and Zach insisted on accompanying me. "This is your moment," he stated proudly. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The event was a whirlwind. I strolled into the large ballroom, feeling both nervous and delighted, surrounded by some of the most prominent personalities in the design industry. When my name was called and I walked up to the stage to receive the prize, the cheering was thunderous. I delivered a brief statement thanking those who had helped me along the way and dedicated the award to the mentors who had pushed me to pursue my goal. Following the ceremony, numerous industry executives approached me, including Isabelle Marchand, creative director of a large advertising agency. She said my art was refreshing and bold, and she wanted to collaborate on a new project. That conversation marked the start of a professional connection that would lead to innumerable opportunities for me in the years ahead. Winning the award also spurred me to launch an initiative I had been planning for years. A mentorship program for budding designers. I termed it Creative Futures. The purpose was straightforward: to give information, guidance, and chances for budding designers who didn't have typical entry points into the business. Setting up the application was no easy task. I collaborated with local design schools and industry professionals to secure money through a variety of grants and sponsorships. Zach, my ever-supportive boyfriend, offered to help with the business side of things, connecting me with potential sponsors through his own network. By the time the program began, we had a roster of excellent mentors and a group of bright, hungry students ready to make an impact on the world. The first year of the program was a huge success. One of our mentees, a young woman named Tasha, went on to secure an internship at a renowned design firm, and several others earned scholarships to further their education. Seeing their progress and excitement reminded me why I fell in love with design in the first place. While I was busy developing Creative Futures, Zach was making waves in his own career. His technology company had developed from a modest, scrappy startup to an industry leader. After years of steady growth, Zach decided to expand internationally, establishing offices in London, Tokyo, Sydney, and Berlin. The expansion was a massive undertaking. Zach spent months traveling between locations, engaging with local teams and supervising the establishment of each new office. It was difficult work, but he relished the challenge. "I've always wanted to take this company global," he told me one night during dinner. "And now it's actually occurring. It feels surreal." Despite his tight schedule, Zach always found time for us. Whether it was setting aside an hour for a peaceful supper at home or surprising me with a weekend getaway, he never let work come between us. His ability to strike a balance between ambition and love was one of many reasons I respected him. As our professions progressed, we began to consider what we wanted our lives to be like in the years ahead. We both enjoyed the vitality of the city, but we also desired a retreat, somewhere we could unwind and recharge away from the hustle and bustle. That is how we ended up purchasing the lake cottage. Originally, Zach came up with the idea. He had been looking through real estate ads one evening when he came upon the property, a large mansion on the banks of Lake Tahoe. The house itself was spectacular, with floor-to-ceiling windows providing breathtaking views of the sea, a large terrace ideal for holding events, and a private dock for boating and kayaking. "Take a look at this," Zach replied, sliding his laptop across the table. "I think we should go see it." I scrolled through the photographs, my heart skipping a beat. "It's beautiful," I said. "Do we really need a facility like this?" "It's not about need," Zach said with a smile. "It's about creating an environment in which we can unwind and enjoy life. We've worked hard, Lindsay. I believe we deserve this." A few weeks later, we flew to Tahoe to tour the property. The instant we stepped inside, I knew it was the one. The house felt like a dream come true, luxurious but intimate, with every detail carefully planned. By the time we departed, we'd made an offer. Having the lake house felt like the pinnacle of everything we'd worked toward. We spent our weekends there, having friends for barbecues on the deck, taking long walks down the beach, and relaxing by the fire pit beneath the stars. It became our haven, a spot where we could unwind from the stresses of our hectic lives and simply enjoy each other's company. Looking back on everything we'd done, I couldn't help but be grateful, not only for our achievement, but also for the path that had led us here. The difficulties we had encountered, the lessons we had learned, and the love that sustained us through it all. I knew there were more chapters to our narrative to be written, but for now, I was pleased. Life was not ideal, but it was ours, which was more than enough. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. My dog saved my life when a stalker broke into my house. My sister-in-law now refuses to let him near my niece, claiming he's dangerous as he's snapped. This is kind of a complicated story, but I'll just get into it. I used to be in this controlling, kind of abusive relationship. When I finally broke it off a year ago, my ex started showing up, trying to get me to take him back. Eventually, it developed into full-on stalking. He would show up at my work, and took to just waiting outside of it after he was banned, leave notes on my car when I was at the grocery store, leave all kinds of flowers outside my house and then stick angry notes on my door after he saw me throw them in the trash, wrote me all kinds of weird, obsessive emails and letters. I've had to change my phone number 3 times. The behavior escalated over time and got scarier, more threatening. In one instance, he started a small fire in my driveway, but the police couldn't get enough evidence connecting him to it. It was after that instance that I put cameras in my yard. I previously only had them pointing at my doors. I was horrified to learn that the police couldn't do shit about any of this until my stalker actually was caught doing something illegal, like breaking into my house. At which point, I might already be dead. I decided I wasn't spending the rest of my life waiting for the other shoe to drop, so I got a handgun and a concealed carry permit, took some self-defense courses, and started doing strength training. I also looked into getting an attack dog, but after all the money I'd sunk into my other methods of protection, they were prohibitively expensive. So I went to my local animal shelter and got the scariest, meanest-looking dog I could find. This is where Thor comes in. He's a 100-pound American bulldog, looks like he'd rip your throat out on sight, but is basically a gigantic teddy bear. He loves every person he's ever met, is incredibly sweet and gentle with my 4-year-old niece, enjoys other animals, and even loves the mailman. I just kind of accepted that he probably wouldn't do anything to protect me from my stalker, but it didn't matter that much because having such a huge dog made me so much more confident. I brought Thor everywhere I could, and was working on getting him trained enough to be an emotional support animal, so I could bring him inside places with me. I absolutely would not do this until he was trained well enough to not disrupt a regular service dog. Last month, I woke up in the middle of the night to Thor whining. I was groggy and thought he had to go to the bathroom, so I got out of bed and opened the door. At that point, my house alarm went off, and pretty soon after that, I was face to face with my stalker. I started screaming and went to run for my gun. Before I could do anything though, Thor ran across the room in full attack mode. The memory is really blurry for me, but there was blood all over my living room, and I remember my stalker was eventually able to escape, at which point Thor chased him outside and then came back to me. When the police showed up, They said Thor was a hero who'd probably saved my life. I don't want to list what they found in my stalker's car after they caught him, and I'm shaking a little as I type this, but I'm sure he was going to bring me somewhere and kill me. It looks like he's going to prison for a long time though, so my nightmare is over. Pretty much everyone in my life thinks Thor is a hero, except my sister-in-law. She and my brother have a 4-year-old, the one I mentioned above, and she says she doesn't want Thor around her, the child, anymore. She says since Thor has snapped in the past, he could do it again, so he's not safe to have around kids. We used to see each other a few times a week before she decided Thor was dangerous. The way she words this makes me really angry because Thor didn't snap. He saw a stranger break into his home, heard his owner scream in terror, and reacted to defend me, himself, and his house. Nothing about that screams dangerous around children, to me, unless my niece is also going to break into my house and threaten me. This is also a very emotional issue for me because Thor isn't just a dog to me. He's my safe place, my hero, the one who protected me and kept me safe when no one else could. I've also gotten increasingly anxious since this happened, and I can't go anywhere without Thor. I barely leave my house, pay to pick up my groceries from the store instead of going in because I know Thor isn't allowed inside, and all my friends know that if Thor isn't welcome in their house, I'm not coming either, although they're perfectly welcome to come hang out at my house instead. I am really going through it, and am working with a therapist to overcome this. Luckily my office is still fully remote, but I need to be able to go back to work once we're in person again. But I really need my brother and sister-in-law's support. I think my sister-in-law thinks I'm just pouting and that's why I won't just leave the dog home and come over without him. I don't know how to explain to them that the fear hasn't stopped just because my stalker is in jail. It's actually a lot worse than it was before. I've already suggested they come over and I create Thor, but that wasn't good enough for her. What can I do to make her understand the situation better? Claudia, my dog took down my stalker after he broke into my house. Now I have severe anxiety and am too afraid to be without him, but my sister-in-law thinks he's unsafe around my 4-year-old niece. I don't know how to make them understand that I really am too afraid to go anywhere without him and not just trying to win an argument. Comments. Comment 1. Most of the people that replied have given you excellent advice. Mine is to get you to see that you won. As I read your post, I realized that you have no idea how smart and strong you are. You were threatened and took action. You got a gun, permit, training, cameras, alarm system, a dog and all the things that I usually have to talk people into. For years I provided a service to victims of stalkers. I would first inform them of their legal rights, tell them their options, help them with filing reports, do a deep background on the stalker, inspect the home for security, advise then on a proper alarm system and changes, find a contractor, help them select a handgun and training, train them what to do at home, at work, on the street, help find a dog, therapist and many other things. Over the years, I developed a thorough understanding of the mind of stalkers and how to deal with them. I know how helpless you feel when the law says you have to be beaten or killed before they can do anything. Today, most major cities have a support group for people that are harassed by stalkers. Sometimes, I would even have a discussion with the stalker, but that only worked 10% of the time. Stalkers know the law, aren't afraid of much and are driven by things most people don't understand. I could list the many things we did, including staking out the house and catching them. I was licensed and permitted in everything. I only share this background so that you know that I have more experience at this than most people. The reason I'm replying to your post is to tell you that you did things on your own, that I had to push clients to do, because they either were paralyzed with fear, lived in denial or were passive and had to be pushed into protecting themselves. Some even wanted to move away. Never run from a stalker and you didn't. In 15 years I never had one client that took the initiative like you have. You did almost everything right and you should be proud of your efforts and know that you are strong enough to deal with this and anything else life throws at you. You won. Don't let this piece of trash know that he caused you pain. These sick people get pleasure from your fear. So as you go forward, don't let your sister-in-law get to you. She has no idea what you went through and her fear of your dog is baseless. You are really lucky and have one heck of a dog. He saved your life and deserves a great partner like you. Please don't underestimate yourself. I never had one client as strong and smart as you. You should be talking to victims and sharing your story of courage and survival. You would provide a service to victims that think no one understands their constant fear. If you did that, you would be giving yourself therapy. Therapy isn't much more than sharing your fears with someone that understands and you truly do. Comment 2. Because there have been plenty of helpful comments already regarding what to do with Thor, great name, and your sister-in-law, I just want to make sure you're also taking care of yourself. What you've been through is horribly traumatic that few people in the world have experienced. I know you've gone to great lengths to protect yourself with classes and the like, but now that the imminent physical threat is taken care of, it's time to take off the emotional scars your stalker has inflicted on you. Please seek out some trauma therapy. You deserve to be able to live without the constant cloud of fear hanging over you. Please seek professional therapy. You'll thank yourself so much for being kind enough to take care of your mental health. Best of luck to you and lots of pets for your perfect doggy. Reply 2, echoing this. OP. Depending on where you live, you may be eligible for trauma therapy paid by the county in which the judicial process occurred. Do they have a victim advocate's office? If not, I recommend looking up the National Association of Crime Victims Compensation Boards, if in U.S. Link. http watch www.danacvc.org. They can help you figure out what you are eligible for as a victim. I can tell you from experience as a victim of a crime that this service has been invaluable and allowed me to receive free weekly trauma therapy for almost a year now. Virtual since COVID. It also might help you find ways to talk to your brother and sister-in-law. Your support system is more important than ever, but sometimes people truly don't understand the brain alteration a trauma can cause, and you might not have the ability to describe it in a way they can understand right now. A therapist can help coach you on how to talk to them so that you can hopefully have time with your family and niece, and your dog. Also, and I hate to add this depressing advice, but talk to the victim advocate or sign up for the victim notification via the prison system so you aren't taken unawares by an early sentencing release. In the case I'm a victim in, the perp was sentenced to 6 years but will probably be out in less than 3. Restraining orders do not always roll over from before, so make sure you have a new one set in place if when this sociopath gets out on parole. So thankful Thor was there to keep you alive. Best wishes on healing. Comment 3. I'm really sorry that this all happened to you. I'm glad that both you and your pup are all right. You might want to look into a box muzzle. I'm not recommending it because Thor did anything wrong, but it might make the other person feel more comfortable. It's a muzzle that can be worn comfortably. Your pup can open its mouth, have his tongue hang out, whatever. I got one when introducing my 100-pound dog to a 2-pound kitten. It's a safety blanket. You can have them together without any fear. That said, it hurts to get hit with the cage. My lovely dumb dog got excited while wearing it, tried to lick me, and ran into my face with it on. I wish you luck with everything. Edit. Thank you to whoever awarded me the silver. That was really kind of you. I had a large aggressive breed of dog that was super friendly and loving. He crossed over the Rainbow Bridge last year. I understand the struggle of having an intimidating dog and the judgments that can go along with it. I especially want aggressive breeds to get all the love and attention they deserve. OP sounds like they're doing a fantastic job. No one should have to pick between a person and partner wanting what is best for their child or their amazing dog, especially one that saved their life. Reply 3. This is probably the best advice. As OP feels absolutely safe with the dog, the parents of the 4-year-old are absolutely responsible for ensuring their child's safety. I like this to keep young children out of the kitchen when cooking things on the stove. A pot of spaghetti is not evil, it's not malicious, and it's absolutely safe when used properly. But if a kid pulls it over on themselves, it's going to be tragic. I look at a dog which is capable of sending a full-grown man to the hospital to be as dangerous as that pot of spaghetti. A few ounces of prevention and inconvenience is absolutely worth everyone's peace of mind. You can even get the dog to love the box muzzle too. Make it so that he gets to play a treat game when he puts it on, and before long that dog will literally be bringing the muzzle to you whenever he hears the brother's car pull up. Comment 4. If it weren't for Thor, your stalker probably wouldn't be carted off to prison. Thor helped provide DNA that pinpoints stalkers to the scene. Best move on your part. That's such great news, and I'm glad things will be better for you. Your sister-in-law is being ridiculous. A home invasion is something a dog notices. That is why he attacked. You were scared and running, and the dog knew this strange guy was the problem, so he took care of it. Your sister doesn't understand dogs and I think is speaking from ignorance. I'm sorry this has happened to you, but parents will be parents. I'd just keep them separate from here on out to keep the peace. Reply 4. Thor sounds very smart and simply amazing. On one hand, I understand the concern of a child around any dog, but Thor didn't snap. He did what OP had hoped he would do and defended his mama from a man who broke into her house. I don't understand why keeping him created is unacceptable to her. They need to have a talk because sister-in-law seems to think OP is pouting, but she just went through severe trauma and relies on him for her anxiety. OP should also get counseling for PTSD though, because realistically she can't bring him with her everywhere for the rest of her life unfortunately. Some businesses don't allow emotional support animals, particularly a large bully breed. My husband has secretly fathered his best friend's children. Now I'm terrified when his eldest son showed romantic interest in my daughter. All names are fake. This began as a dark, intrusive thought that I could never shake off, and over the years it has bloomed into a poison flower that infects my entire psyche. I'm a 42-year-old woman. My husband Luke is 43, and so is Amy. I met Luke in college, but he's known Amy since they were about 7. They did everything together and understood each other implicitly. They were best friends. They've always insisted that they are surrogate siblings to each other. Naturally I, as a new girlfriend, felt a little threatened by Amy and her closeness to Luke, but they both reassured me I had nothing to worry about. That their bond was not romantic and had never been sexual. That Amy really was just the sister that Luke never had. I believed them, and it didn't take long for me to forget any and all insecurity I had about Amy. She became my friend too. She officiated our wedding. Luke and I have built a wonderful life together and we always had a strong relationship. After we got married and moved in together, we still saw a lot of Amy, and I was fine with that. I've spent many nights in the town trying to help Amy find a man, as she has always lamented how she is unlucky in love. Luke and I started to have children after we were married, and, at around the same point, so did Amy. For further context, my children are Sophie, 15, Owen, 12, Louise, 10, and Carter, 6. Amy's children are Tom, 17, Kaylee, 14, and twins Adam and Jenna, 9. Now, Amy was not in a relationship at this point. She was not married. As far as I knew, she was dating, but not consistently. As Luke and I had more kids and our family grew, periodically Amy would find herself pregnant as well. It happened a few times, and Luke and I never knew anything about the fathers in question. I kind of assumed that maybe Amy was sleeping around and not keeping in contact with her one-night stands. Luke agreed this was probably the answer. While I did ask each time if Amy knew of paternity, she always said no, and she didn't seem that worried about the idea of raising kids on her own, so I didn't pester her. Of course, she had us to support her, so there was that. While Amy never asked for any help, of course Luke was never going to let his best friend struggle to stay afloat when she had children to raise. Financially, we are very fortunate and privileged. I have a job that pays handsomely, and Luke also had wealthy parents who already knew and loved Amy, so they were happy to provide for her. My in-laws defy all stereotypes. They are the kindest and gentlest people. So we were able to support Amy. To get her somewhere to stay with her kids. People might be tempted to call her a leech, but I never saw it that way. None of us did. She needed help and we could provide it. I also know people are going to criticize her for her lack of responsibility and question why she never used more reliable birth control. Honestly, that is a long story that I don't want to get into because even I don't fully understand her reasoning, but it was quite important to her that she never be on birth control and that whatever came of that choice, she would accept. It wasn't religiously motivated, I know that, but it was that degree of significance to Amy. She really did not want to take birth control. She's explained it to me more than once, but I'm still not clear on why. Of course, Amy being Luke's best friend since they were kids, it's not unreasonable that sometimes they hang out together while I'm not there. Hey, that's fine. Sometimes I hang out with Amy one-on-one as well, though Luke does it more. She was his friend first. This included him going over to where she was staying and at times, sleeping over there. Was I a fool to trust him and believe nothing was going on? Perhaps. But for years, they presented as being buddies? Like siblings. I didn't pick up on any vibes between them, not ever. As one can expect, our children were brought up together. Not in the same house, our home is decently sized, but even we don't have the room for 8 kids. But we made sure Amy's children met ours from a young age, and they always got along, and strong bonds of friendship have formed over the years, which is good. Especially if I'm right, and they share blood. I've been dawdling getting to the main point. Yes. I have come to suspect that Luke fathered at least one of Amy's kids, if not all of them. Frankly, I do suspect they are all his. I would never have believed my husband to be capable of such a thing, and he's given me no indication that he is the unfaithful sort. But he does spend a lot of time with Amy, and I have to confess I cannot remember seeing her with any real boyfriend over the years. She would talk to men at bars and parties, I would try to be her wingman, and so on. But nothing ever seemed to really happen, so when she got pregnant the first time, I was curious. When it happened again and again, I began to wonder if she had some sort of secret fella who she didn't want us to know about for whatever reason. But I couldn't think of any reason why she would hide him, especially from her children. After Carter, our youngest, was born, Luke and I agreed that the time had come for him to have a vasectomy. Amy's twins had come just a couple of years prior. Of course, after the procedure, Luke and I continued to make love, but I no longer had to think about pregnancy. Meanwhile, Amy never got pregnant again, after the twins. Is it a coincidence that Luke had a vasectomy and then both of us stopped getting pregnant? I don't know. But Luke would still visit her, and he wasn't just going to see her, but checking up on her children as well. In general, I should have paid more attention to it sooner, but Luke has always acted like a father to them, especially as they've gotten older. He's the father they never had. He doesn't neglect me, or our children, not one bit. He's doing double duty. On its own, the idea that he is a surrogate father to Amy's fatherless children isn't inherently suspicious. One could call it noble. But it combines with a lot of other little things. There is appearance as well. I won't go into specifics of hair color, eye color, or unique physical traits, because I'd rather limit the identifying factors of the people involved and keep this whole thing as vague as possible. But suffice it to say, Amy's children, they certainly look like they could be Luke's. Kaylee has a very unusual allergy that Luke also has. The twins look very much like him, Adam in particular. The older Tom has gotten, the more of Luke I can see in his face and personality. While their race doesn't matter, the reality is that Luke is a different race than Amy, and Amy's children look pretty biracial. I could easily believe their father is the same race as Luke. Doesn't mean Luke has to be the father, but it sure seems like it. I have never voiced my anxieties to either Amy or Luke. I don't want to be the bad guy, and, guilty or innocent, I already know they would flatly deny my accusations and be hurt by them. Imagine if that drama reached the ears of my kids, or Amy's kids. Either way, Luke continues to spend time with Amy and her children, just as her children spend time with mine. I have hinted to Luke that I feel needy for more attention and wish he wouldn't give as much to Amy. But he either missed my cues or pretended that he missed them. I don't want to push this idea that he's favoring her, because it's not even really true. He's never neglected me for her. I can't shake the feeling that Luke and Amy have been intimate before, likely numerous times. So far as I know, Amy never really wanted to be a mother either. She wasn't opposed to it, and when each of her children came into the world she instantly fell in love with them, but motherhood was never really a major part of her life plan or identity. In the grand scheme of things, when we would talk about the future, she would sometimes mention a husband and children, but it never seemed like something she had her heart particularly set on. So, I don't think this is a case of Luke just giving Amy children. I doubt that was the motive for the infidelity. That would have been a side effect. I've been letting this go and turning a blind eye for years. It was a dark thought in the back of my mind after Kaylee's allergy was discovered, but I dismissed it. Got worse after the twins were born. I dismissed it. Then, when Amy stopped having babies, I wanted to feel reassured by that. But, Luke had gotten a vasectomy, so if anything, that made my anxiety worse. There have been nights that I wished the twins were younger, that they had come along after Luke's procedure. It's been twisting me into knots for a long time, but I don't want to be the one who rips our family apart, especially since, technically, I could be wrong. Except now I'm very afraid, because in the last few months we've had a new development in our kids' social circle. Tom, Amy's eldest, asked Sophie out. Sophie? My eldest. She's really blossomed over these last few years and become quite the outspoken beauty, so I'm not shocked to see she's getting male attention, but Tom asking her out had me thrown. Sophie said no, but only because I'm quite protective when it comes to her exploring dating, and she knew she'd have to ask me first. I could tell she was flattered and intrigued by his interest and wanted to say yes. She approached me to talk to me about it. Bless my girl, she did everything right. I think she expected I would see things her way and agree that she could date Tom. Much to her surprise, I very firmly said no. That caused a bit of conflict. She didn't even want to date him that badly, she just couldn't understand why she wasn't allowed to. And I couldn't explain it to her. All I could come up with was, he's too old for you, which he is, but it's not really about that. When Amy and Luke heard, I was so very curious to see what their reactions would be. If either of them had agreed with Sophie and tried to convince me that the two of them should be allowed to date, I think I would have been relieved and taken that as proof that I was wrong about something going on between them. Wrong about who fathered Amy's children. But, the ambiguity continued. They took my side. Both of them put their foot down, though not as fiercely as I did. Luke agreed with me, but he also worried that trying to forbid such a romance would only make Sophie want it more. He's probably right about that. Amy seemed more apathetic to the idea. She didn't want Tom to date Sophie either, and she backed me up. But I don't know, she just wasn't taking it as seriously. She seemed to think it was a fleeting crush. Well, it wasn't. In the months following those conversations, Tom would spend more and more time with Sophie. They would be alone, or with other friends, any time they possibly could. It's become abundantly clear that Tom is crazy about Sophie and wants to be with her. And he definitely wants to be physical. I've been watching them like a hawk and noticed his eye wandering many times. And while I'm doing everything I can to kill this budding romance in the crib, I also am feeling somewhat powerless. Sophie hasn't outwardly defied me, she's still just hanging out with Tom as friends. So forcing them to stop spending time together would be unreasonable, and probably encourage more sneaking around. But I'm so afraid that they're already doing that. My nightmare is that they're secretly dating, and doing God knows what when no one is looking. I've observed Tom being rather handsy with Sophie, and she presents no objection whatsoever. And I just don't know what to say. I had considered trying to convince Sophie that Tom is like her brother, but if she doesn't see him that way, I don't really have the power to rewrite their emotional dynamic or the history of their friendship. I always saw Amy and her children as being like family, but my kids might see Amy's kids more as best friends. The problem is, of course, that if my husband has indeed been carrying on an affair over the years and I'm right about the paternity of Amy's children, then Tom and Sophie cannot be anything more than friends under any circumstances, end of discussion. It can never happen. I feel powerless to stop it though. Luke has apparently talked to Tom about this, as has Amy, but he is unrelenting and he won't give up on Sophie. I think she enjoys that attention and devotion. Tom has also confronted me and asked why I'm so against this when I know him very well and I know he would be good to Sophie. I didn't know what to say other than to fall back on her being too young for him. But that won't work forever. If, God forbid, they're still attracted to each other in a few years, then they'll pursue this with abandon, and once they're legal adults, there's nothing I can do about it. Amy and Luke agree with me that Tom cannot date Sophie, but that's all they've really done. They feel just as powerless as me to prevent teen love. It genuinely feels sometimes like they've just given up and will bury their heads in the sand about this. Just do nothing and hope the feelings pass as Tom and Sophie get older. Which, yeah, they're in high school. It's unlikely Tom will be in love with Sophie forever. But my fear is that she'll let him do something intimate with her before that time comes, something neither of them can take back. I am this close to opening a door I cannot close, this close to screaming at Luke that all this wouldn't be happening if he hadn't cheated on me these many years. If he hadn't been all but raising a second family with his surrogate sister behind my back. Now Luke's son wants to fuck our daughter, his actual sister, because as far as he knows, she's just his childhood friend. And it's all Luke and Amy's fault for what they've done. If I speak up, everything gets blown to hell. On the off chance that I am wrong, I'm a horrible monster who accused the love of my life and one of my closest friends of doing something horrible. If I'm right, it still tears our entire structure apart. The family and social unit we've become over the last several years is gone, and everyone will be stressed and upset even if Luke and I don't divorce. If I do nothing, Sophie's eventually going to sleep with Tom and be his girlfriend. And I'm low-key terrified it will happen sooner than later, or worse, that it's already happened under my nose. I hope to hell this relationship fades as they mature, but what if it doesn't? What if they wind up being together for years? What if they marry, want to get pregnant someday? And if I tell Sophie the truth about Amy's kids, then everyone else finds out too, and that's going to ruin so many lives. It would shatter my kids' perception of their father, and their Aunt Amy. Luke is Owen's hero. I don't even want to think about how much this would hurt him. And what about Amy's children? They are innocent. They didn't ask for this. They don't control where they came from, and I don't want to hurt them. Admittedly, I'm not happy with Tom at the moment. A week ago I saw him put his hand on Sophie's butt and I wanted to knock his teeth out. But even he doesn't deserve to be burdened by the knowledge that it's his half-sister he's been fantasizing about. It's all so fucked up and I don't know what to do. I've been looking the other way and letting my husband and his best friend insult me for such a long time now. I thought I could live with it. But this business with Tom and Sophie has me distressed. Judgment, NTA. Update 1. First of all, wow. I did not expect my post to get as much traction as it did. I was half worried that someone in my family or social circle might find it, especially when someone alerted me that the post had been shared to Facebook. But, as far as I can tell, no one in my family has seen it. I want to thank all of the kind commenters who wished me well. To those who were more frustrated with my indecision, I get it. But I was operating with an uncertain situation and the stakes were incredibly high. I feel like no matter what choice I made, something could and likely would go wrong. I've spent the last 5 years imagining different scenarios based on different ways I could go about this if I ever decided to act on it. To everyone who was clamoring for an update, I have one for you. I previously said that I was going to do a secret DNA test, that I had decided on that course of action. In the end, I couldn't go through with it, and now I am regretting that, because the window to do so is essentially closed. I just felt like it would be out of line for me to do that to another person's child behind their back. Ethically, it was dicey. I've since consulted with my lawyer as many commenters suggested, and she advised me against doing so, because no matter what the results were, it would make me look bad in a potential divorce proceeding. But I really wish I had done it anyway, and just not told anyone. Because I really, badly need to know, and I still don't know for sure. Likewise, I wanted to tell Sophie in confidence, but the more I thought about it, even that seemed over the line. Like I had no right to plant such ideas in her mind about her father without even talking to him first. So, what I ended up doing was confronting Luke and Amy. Many comments suggested this as well. I finally told both of them that we needed to have a serious talk. It felt counterproductive to approach just one of them, because I figured they would tell the other about what happened in their own words before I could prepare my own. I wanted them both to hear what I had to say. Once all the kids were at school, I laid down all of my suspicions and the reasons. I made it clear how much I love both of them, but a combination of clues had led me to notice the similarities between Luke and Amy's children, and I didn't even list all of them in the original post. For example, Luke has been a sleepwalker in the past. So have Sophie, Tom, and Adam. I said over and over how much they meant to me and how I didn't want to believe it, but the thought had crept into my mind in the past. How I had dismissed it before, but now, with Tom and Sophie having crushes on each other, it became necessary to pose the question. So I asked if they had ever crossed the line, if Luke had ever been unfaithful, if there was even the slightest possibility that any of Amy's children were his. I was just trying not to cry. Well, they reacted exactly as I would have expected. Their responses were perfect and so very well rehearsed. I genuinely can't tell if it was honest emotion or powerful gaslighting. Amy was more upset than Luke, or at least more outwardly upset. She was angry, offended at the accusation. Luke just seemed heartbroken by it. Maybe they were just acting, but I don't know. Somehow, they had reasonable responses to all of the points I brought up. They asked questions I didn't know how to answer. I had never objected to them having alone time before. Why did it suddenly bother me now? Do Amy's children really resemble Luke that much, or are things like hair color pretty basic traits to have in common? The whole family had always treated Amy and her kids as part of our unit, and I had previously commended Luke for stepping up and being a father to Amy's kids since they didn't have one. Why was I now saying it was a bad thing? What exactly did I want them to do? How could I think such a thing about them? Why had I waited so long to say something? Luke was more understanding than Amy. He respected my feelings, or at least he acted like he did. Amy appeared to feel more betrayed by what I said. I ended up apologizing several times even though I'm not sure I did anything wrong. Luke also apologized for anything he'd done, to indicate he was unfaithful. I asked Amy more pointedly that, if not Luke, who had fathered her children? She snapped back that it was none of my business, and I could tell she was in no mood to get personal or vulnerable with me after my accusations. I'm not proud to say that I lost my temper, and said that after everything we had done for her and her children, such information was not a lot to ask and perhaps she owed it to us. I regretted the words as soon as I said them, but Amy shouted back that I had never done anything for her, that it was Luke and his parents who had kept her afloat all these years, not me. She went on a longer tirade about how I had always acted superior to her, which I don't believe I did, though it's possible that I gave off that vibe unintentionally. Luke did his best to calm her down, but the room was still fraught with tension. I don't know Reddit, I just don't know. It's driving me to the edge of madness. There is a way to be certain, of course. Not certain of my husband's fidelity, but of the paternity of Amy's children. So I asked Luke, for my own peace of mind, for the sake of our daughter, and for our family unit, if he could please get a DNA test done, a paternity test. I went on to say that I knew he disliked and distrusted such things, but that I really needed this. I could see the pain in Luke's eyes. Maybe it was an act, but he did seem genuinely hurt that I was asking for this, that him giving me his word that he had always been faithful was not enough for me. But he very reluctantly agreed to participate in a DNA test. Unfortunately, Amy did not, and that's where we hit a roadblock. I was afraid of this. But Amy was infuriated at the whole concept and told me in no uncertain terms that I would not be getting samples of her children's DNA and basically told me to fuck off for asking, several times in several variations. I pressed Luke, and honestly he was a bit useless but probably right. He tried to convince Amy but she wouldn't hear of it, and he kind of shrugged to me when I pushed him for further support. Because he can't force her to get the test done, if she refuses, that's really a dead end. Trust me, it is. I looked into this quite a bit and consulted with my lawyer. The problem is, Luke could, in theory, petition the court to demand a paternity test for Tom and the others. The issue is that, to do this, he'd essentially be claiming he slept with Amy and he believes her children to be his. That would be the version of events he'd be maintaining. But Luke has staunchly insisted that nothing ever happened with Amy. That he never cheated on me. Whether or not he's being honest about this is another story, but he'd essentially have to go on record and make a claim that he isn't prepared to make. He is quite certain the children aren't his and he has no intention of fighting for custody of them. So no judge is going to compel Amy to submit samples of her children's DNA. Tom is also old enough that his consent would be a factor. If both he and Amy refuse to participate in the test, it's unlikely that Luke would have a case. He'd have to target one of Amy's younger children, like say, one of the twins. But he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to take his best friend to court to prove something that, in his words, he already knows isn't true. Luke is asking me to please just let this go, and trust him, because pursuing this will fracture everything. And according to my lawyer, it's not realistic anyway. For Luke to establish paternity, he would need to admit to an affair in the first place, and he's not doing that. And if he did, that would pretty much be all the proof I needed to be certain, even if I'd need more in a court case. I pestered him further about Tom and Sophie. Insisted that I didn't want them dating. Luke agreed, and apparently Amy still agrees. Luke plans to have a talk with Tom and activate protective Papa Bear mode. Among other things, he's going to remind Tom that in a couple of months when he turns 18, him being intimate with Sophie will literally be a crime. I wouldn't actually press charges against him as I know he'd never do anything against Sophie's will, but I'm not above implying the threat. Thankfully, Luke isn't either. I did ask him if he'd be open to potentially swiping a sample of Tom's DNA to do a private paternity test, but he was very hesitant about the idea. Like me, he viewed it as unethical. He also pointed out that if we were to do this and Amy found out, it would mean the end of our friendship with her, most likely. Things are, Luke believes, still in a salvageable state, where Amy and I could reconcile and become friends again, and I can see how much he wants this to happen. But, if I did a DNA test on Tom behind Amy's back and she found out, I think she would hit the roof and I wouldn't entirely blame her. Though I'd be very interested to see the results. Luke ended up going to see Amy and spending the night. I know all of you are cringing and throwing up your hands, and trust me, I wasn't happy about it. That was a very long conversation. But he was adamant that he needed to perform damage control. So they spent the night together. With Luke maintaining that nothing happened, I did not sleep a wink and I kept texting him for updates. So far as I can tell, Amy will cool off, but she needs a little time. Luke and I talked things over when he came back the next morning. It was an emotionally fulfilling conversation and we ended up agreeing to take the kids, our kids, not Amy's, to visit their grandparents for a few days. It was an impromptu visit but we've done it before and they were delighted to have us. I just really wanted our family to spend some time together away from Amy's side of the family, so to speak. I always love getting to see my in-laws. I'll refer to them as Jim, 75 million, and Kat, 67 degrees Fahrenheit. I know Reddit is famous for stories about the mill from hell, but in my life that couldn't be further from the truth. I feel safe with them. To the point that, when they took notice of how distant Luke and I were from each other, I finally relented and confessed my fears. I told them of my anxiety that Amy and Luke were having an affair, and that Amy's children might be his. Here's where things got a little bit interesting. When I told them what I was feeling, Kat just gave Jim this pointed look, and did a big, dramatic sigh. So it turns out, Kat has had similar misgivings to mine and genuinely suspected over the years that Luke and Amy were closer than they'd ever admit, that they had crossed the line in the past. Jim, on the other hand, simply refuses to even consider the idea. He has always insisted that Kat is seeing things that aren't there. He maintains that Luke and Amy are like siblings, and would never do such a thing. Kat thinks his stance on this is naive and that, even if she and Jim had taken Amy in and loved her like a daughter, that didn't mean Luke viewed her as a sister or that she viewed him as a brother. But Jim just continued to insist that this is what they are and had always been. I could tell that he and Kat have already had this conversation before, and they kept going in circles, with Kat getting exasperated. She pointed out that, surrogate siblings or not, Luke and Amy were not actually brother and sister, so nothing was stopping them from being physical together if they felt a mutual attraction. At that point, Jim just sighed and walked away from the conversation. So yes, Kat has privately wondered if Amy's children weren't fathered by Luke, which is part of why she has always treated them as her grandchildren. Which was never something that I minded, to be clear. I also don't mind that Kat never voiced these concerns to me. She had no proof, and she saw far less of Luke and Amy's closeness in our adult lives than I did. As for the kids? They're doing all right. I don't know what Amy told her children, but I think the general consensus, The official version of events is that Amy and I had a fight and needed a break from each other. That's what Luke and I told our children, and when pressed for more information, Luke did defend me and shut down the questions, saying it wasn't their business. I don't know if Amy kept to that version of events, but my children and her children have each other's phone numbers and social media, so they've presumably still been in contact over the last 2 days. I think my kids would have kept Amy's kids in the loop on the updates, and if Amy had told them anything else significant, they would have relayed that information to my kids. After all, we know Sophie and Tom are very close. I did try and talk to Sophie about that more, but the timing was off, because Sophie rejected my counsel and interpreted my reinforced reluctance as being attributed to my fight with Amy. She maintained that she wasn't dating Tom. To what degree that's actually true, I don't know. But she was going to remain close friends with him, and while she isn't usually a disobedient child, she made it very clear that she was putting her foot down on this one, and, to be fair, I can't really justify trying to separate them or forbid them from being friends. They've known each other for years. Luke has my back on them not being allowed to date, but he wouldn't have my back on them not hanging out anymore. I wish I had a more definitive update. If anything significant happens in the next few days, I can let you guys know. I'm mostly just kicking myself for not having done the secret test, even for my own peace of mind, as now I feel like I'm locked out of the only way to get definitive proof one way or the other. Comments. Comment 1. They spent the night together. OP, come on. That's not acceptable. They're definitely a couple. Comment 2. Honestly, do you really think he's sleeping on the sofa? Why is he sleeping over there if there is nothing going on? You go to your friend's house and talk, and then you go back home to your wife and kids. WTF? What about your kids? He doesn't give a shit about any of you. Time to have another chat with the lawyer, and you really need to get more angry about this. You are way too understanding. This woman has wrecked all your lives, and even your in-laws have been suspecting the same all along. Comment 3. Luke and Amy are a couple and OP is the side piece at this point. Update 3. I think my husband fathered his best friend's children, and now one of them is attracted to my daughter. 1 day later. I didn't expect to have another update so quickly, but after posting my first update I did a lot of thinking about my kids. I ultimately decided that whatever else happened, I needed to warn Sophie about the situation, and do so immediately. To hell with Luke and whatever that meant for him. To hell if that meant all of the kids learned of the situation. She needed to be aware of what she might be getting herself into. So I discreetly kept her out of school. We went back home, to our home, last night, and this morning, I dropped everyone off and saved Sophie for last, before driving right past her school and telling her that we needed to talk. Always a frightening thing for a teenager to hear from a parent, but I was quick to establish that she was not in trouble, but she needed to know the truth about why Amy and I were fighting, why her dating Tom was out of the question. I very gently explained that because of Luke's closeness to Amy and Tom's resemblance to him, I had come to suspect that perhaps Luke and Amy were intimate at some point over the years. If that was true, and there was any chance Tom's father was actually Luke, that would be a significant problem. Sophie was quiet during all of this, and even after I had stopped talking to let her respond, she paused for quite a while, before she finally said that we needed to get Tom and discuss this with him as well. I had no objections, so she texted him to meet with us. They're both skipping school today, but Sophie gets straight A's and this is extremely important, so I looked the other way. Tom came to meet us, and Sophie had me relay what I told her to him as well. I apologized to him for any indication I might have given that I didn't think he was good enough for my daughter, and to both of them for not telling the truth sooner. Tom and Sophie just gave each other this oddly knowing stare. And Reddit, that's when they blew my mind. Sophie spoke first, with Tom backing her up. They revealed to me that in fact, they had already known about Luke and Amy, or at least they had strongly suspected. Apparently Tom has overheard conversations that are questionable, as well as overhearing the sounds of sex from Amy's room, sounds he would just as soon forget, but all signs point to Amy's lover having been Luke. Tom had wondered for a very long time, and back in January, he finally voiced his fears to Sophie. She agreed with them. She could also see a strange sort of closeness between her father and his mother. They agreed that Luke was likely having an affair. They agreed that because of Kaylee's allergy, Luke might very well be her father. And if Kaylee was Luke's daughter, the rest of Tom's siblings could be Luke's as well. Tom could be Luke's kid himself. The math led them to the same places as me. So Sophie and Tom came up with a little plan. As it turns out, they are not in love. They never were. They're still just best friends. But they had the same instinct as me, that they didn't want to blow up our entire family and social unit without more direct evidence, which Tom has been working on acquiring. And though Sophie very badly wanted to tell me the truth, she was hesitant because she knew it would shatter me. She had no idea I was already suffering in silence. Sophie apologized for not voicing her suspicions sooner. Honestly, we both cried, and I made sure she understood that none of this was her fault, and that I loved her very much. So, the bottom line is, Sophie and Tom already know they could be half-siblings and aren't actually interested in being a couple. That was their idea for how to rock the boat. To force Luke and Amy to do something about the situation rather than just keep making a fool out of me. I also think it was Sophie's way of punishing them for their affair. Teenagers can be vindictive, so they concocted this idea that they wanted to date. Every flirtation I've witnessed, every inappropriate touch, all staged, apparently, and for the benefit of Luke, Amy, or both. This was supposed to make them sweat, and Tom expected they would jump out of their seats to forbid it from happening. When I was the one who did instead, that kind of threw the kids for a loop. They couldn't understand why I cared more than the actual cheaters. They began to suspect that maybe I knew. Tom confronting me that one time about why can't I date Sophie, was him trying to gauge if I knew or not. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised. Sophie and Tom have always been close friends and confided in each other. Maybe I should be a little more concerned at how sneaky they've been, but honestly, I'm just so relieved they're not dating. Sure, they could be lying to throw off the scent, I guess, but they apparently already knew that they're likely related. They didn't blink at all when I told them. We even had a bit of a laugh together when Tom mentioned how he had been a little offended that I was so against him dating my daughter before. I kind of jokingly asked him, "So you don't think she's gorgeous?" And Tom, bless his heart, shrugged it off. She is. But so is my English teacher, and I'm not asking her out either. Either way, the question now is, where to go from here? We have to figure that out. I will say that it is such a relief to have told Sophie, and I feel like an elephant has taken one of its feet off my chest. Having her in my corner, and Tom in my corner as well, means a lot to me, and even though I basically just got it absolutely confirmed that Luke is sleeping with Amy, I kind of already knew that anyway. So now it's just a question of how to proceed. Tom has already volunteered to submit his DNA so I can compare it to Luke's, and both he and Sophie advise me not to tell Luke and Amy when I do this, which I agree with. They're both completely on my side, which means more to me than I can ever express to them. Tom has also been trying to set up a camera in Amy's room to catch her and Luke in the act. Sophie told me flat out that I needed to divorce her dad, and hearing that from my own daughter made it clearer than it's ever been. She's right. Comments. Comment 1. Okay doke. Tom and Sophie have to be sitting on the couch when Luke comes home and drops the bomb that Sophie is pregnant. Or, to say that they had the same thoughts and did their own DNA tests and surprise, you are the father up. Actually, that was something they had considered doing before. Now that the three of us are on the same page, it's not the worst idea. Comment 2. Why not just DNA test the two kids against each other and stop dragging it out? The test will let you know if they share the same father, and then it would be clear your husband is the father of both. Comment 3. Getting 2 ancestry test kits is simple, they are on Amazon. Comment 4. I don't even care if it's fictional or not, these updates have me hooked. Comment 5. I finally understand why my granny used to watch those god-awful drama shows. It's super fake, but damn if it isn't entertaining. These posts are just new age soaps. I am not the OOP. Please do not harass the OOP. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.